looking up to Thomas Jefferson, or looking up to Nikola Tesla, or looking up to Magellan. I mean, kids, Magellan's a lot cooler than Justin Bieber. He circumnavigated with one ship the entire planet. He was killed by wild natives before they got back to Portugal. And when they got back, there was only like 11 people alive of the 200-something crew, and the entire ship was rotting down to the waterline. That's destiny, that's will, that's striving, that's being a trailblazer, an explorer, going into space, mathematics, quantum mechanics, the secrets of the universe. It's all there. Life is fiery with its beauty, its incredible detail. Tuning into it, they want to shut your mind. Talking about Justin Bieber. It's pure evil. They're taking your intellect, your soul, and giving you Michael Jordan and Bieber. Unlock your human potential. Defeat the globalists who want to shatter your mind. Your doorway to perception. I want to see you truly live. I want to see you truly be who you are.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to today's live stream. I can't get enough of that intro. I think Alex Jones is hilarious. And not only do we have a great intro today, but we have a fantastic guest who I've had the pleasure of having kind of some brief conversations, interesting conversations on some Twitter spaces. I kind of seen him around, hanging around on kind of the Time, Internet Money, Telegram. He's also kind of been very famous, bringing some kind of interesting models, talking about interesting models with kind of Hex, Pulse Chain, PulseX, that kind of thing. And so, without further ado, I would like to introduce Mr. Top Gun. How are you, sir?
I'm doing excellent, thank you. How are you, Brennan?
I'm pretty good. Did I do an okay enough job? Did I at least not wildly misrepresent you with that very brief intro? I don't know if you
No,
or not.
no, not at all. I'm the math guy that kind of lurks in the background and did tech. So the only thing you missed is, like, out of nowhere, I used to do tech support for HP and Verizon long ago in another life. So when Pulse Chain launched and everyone was getting their transactions stuck, I ran like 2 days of spaces and cooked my phone battery doing tech support, helping people get their wallet transactions unstuck. So that's my community efforts. Yeah, that's the whole resume. Yay!
Oh man, that's the Lord's work you're doing. And I also want to acknowledge that I have seen you demonstrate a great deal of patience, patience that I have difficulty myself mustering. So I want to applaud you for that, sir. Okay, so I kind of like to get to know my guests a little bit whenever I invite people on. And so, every time I have someone else on, I want to kind of come up with interesting ways to ask, questions to kind of get to know the person. And so I have an extremely important question for you, sir. I think this question will, frame, to a large degree, your level of insight, not just into crypto, but in life. And without further ado, this question is, what is your take on birds? Are they real? Are they government spy drones? What's your take? This is very important that you get this right, sir. So please.
Okay. I really always heard a bunch of people growing up go on about Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds. They're all so frightening. I watched the movie and I'm like, nah, I still don't get it. Parrots are hilarious, but really, our cell phones could do all the spy work times 10 that some drone they'd have to pay to operate, and you pay to operate the cell phone. Like, no, I don't think birds are secret spy drones.
Sounds like what are you going to say next? Are you some round earther? Is that what you're going to say next?
Yeah, if we want to go there, yes, I am still a round earther. Yes.
Okay, well, this is a tough start, man. Okay. So, for the people who honestly want to get to know the real you, why don't we give an official, real kind of brief introduction of who you are, what you're about?
All right. As catch me off guard. Like, really, I haven't gone too much into depth about who I am with this community. Like, I came in and have just presented myself as someone who likes the principles of the community, could stand behind a lot of the things that Richard Hart stood for, stands for. He hasn't been very public lately, other than a few tweets. But who am I essentially? I suppose I got an interesting backstory myself, but once upon a time, I had a very bright future in high school, but some health problems. So I missed a lot of days, but I was on our roll. Scholarship all lined up, everything was good, but I ended up having a vice principal on my butt about the amount of time I missed, and got kicked out of high school, lost my scholarship. Life took a completely different turn for me, but I always stayed fascinated with computers and got a whole career doing tech support, Hewlett-Packard engineering degree, worked for Compaq Computers, ended up supporting every bit of hardware ever made before 2010, and ended up working in Verizon doing DSL technical support, understanding how the entire internet infrastructure was done after I had taken some courses from an ex-military programmer for the Canadian military that I got my Cisco certifications through, and learned how to do C++ circuit board programming. So, I mean, I know everything from the ASCII table to the user APIs of most software. I can edit the Windows registry. I understand a lot more about technology than most people could even fathom. Sometimes I just don't even know how to relate it, though. I'm not great with terms. So I lose sometimes. I just forget all the, like, it's so hard to keep track of the language, essentially, for me. But that was all after the .com boom. So it basically, I was stuck in tech support, being yelled at by people for the most part. And it was not great for the psyche. It does something to you a little bit, and I ended up just snapping and going into cooking food and staying as far away from computers as I could, and then went into construction. So for the last 10 years, I've basically been on vacation from computers until top of 2021. And just when I left, like, Bitcoin had come out, and at the point I didn't understand liquidity. I understood the encryption scheme, how the blockchain grew, what the network was going to require, the ever-increasing storage and ever-increasing electricity costs. And I went, this is really seems unfeasible long-term. And how are you guys just making money? I'm pretty sure that's counterfeiting. That's got to be illegal. I didn't understand liquidity. So yeah, I ran away from the whole industry of computers and learned to start building houses. I found it very serene, very good sense of pride at looking at my finished work going, I did that. Families might enjoy that for decades to come. It's a lot more pride than someone yelling at me, why doesn't my internet work after I went and looked at my porn? Do I really want to go there? So yeah, it was a whole change of idea that, but anyways, I suffered a bit through the pandemic. I've wondered sometimes about how vocal I should get about this, but I mean, I ended up, I suffered from the disease of addiction. I mean, enough wrong turns in life, and I ended up coping with some of the wrong mechanisms. Drinking a little too much, partying too much, developed a wonderful karaoke voice. But, you know,
silver linings, you know?
Yeah, but when it came to the pandemic, drug addiction basically got to me. I was losing hope in our society, in the world around us. Now, it wasn't sci-fi, Richard's book, that got me or anything. It was actually another program I did find that was full of spiritual guidance, an idea of better ways of living life, choosing a better way of life. And it helped a lot to find that community, to find some reassuring principles, some like-mindedness in trying to be a good person, because nice guys tend to finish last. So it was really good for me. And in that community, I found a Hexacan. And the reason I found that Hexacan was because he did benefit from sci-fi, and he saw the similarities. So when I started looking at the Hexacan community and seeing, oh, you've got okay, he can be loud, obnoxious, and egotistical, but he actually wrote a genuine self-help book with actual good advice in it and is actually giving it out for free, unlike pretty much anybody in the world. And that is really altruistic, really awesome. And I started to get behind the openness and welcomeness and warmingness of the community. Of course, this was towards the top of the bull market when Island Boys were making their video, and I should have known it was the top when I was buying. But at least I've also found I have an eye for charts. So doing math my entire life, numbers just kind of fly through my head a lot of times, and watching charts is just kind of organic, natural. So I've at least gotten good at catching bottoms, and that's the other thing I got famous for, was doing the math to prove why the buy and burn worked. And then even though I bought at the top, basically from that point on, I called out each and every hex bottom pretty much on the way down, and bought it. And that was where I was bragging, like, yep, I bought this bottom, I hope it's the bottom. And then, okay, gonna DCA again, has been the rhythm down. But that's,
was that on your Twitter, on your YouTube, or?
Yeah, my YouTube actually has over 100 episodes from last year. I was very, very busy, but scaling a business takes some more energy and effort, and it unfortunately takes a lot more of my time. So I haven't gotten as many episodes out this year since then, but I try to be very active on Twitter. So yeah, when my favorite assets are bottoming, or think they are, I've tried to call out something. Of course, with the launch of Pulse Chain, yeah, I pretty much cooked my phone. So after the opening weekend, I was very little present for the next like 4 to 6 weeks. It's been nice. I got my battery replaced, fixed my phone, back into trying to reconnect to the community. So whatever time I have to give to it, I'd love to. And the math model, a lot of people are probably pretty upset that I don't bust this thing out anymore, or I haven't really since launch. The idea of the math model, the complexity of tracking an entire living, breathing, organic market that is active every second of the day, with a speculative model, the amount of detail, the thing is already huge. So when you get to see the size of it, and I tell you, I am not making this up when I say it has to be a minimum of 50 times bigger just to really track the daily and do it for years like it does. I'll show you the model when I dive into it, but the idea was to show how the buy and burn would work over time. And so since it's hard to track that kind of environment, I said, here's a simulated environment. There's no market buys except the buy and burn. So let me simulate a bunch of huge dumps all at once and still show you how the buy and burn can cope with it over time. So essentially, the model does demonstrate how Pulse X works, and so it does have some price projections it comes up with, but they're not, and I'll explain as we go through it why they're not 100% accurate. I mean, it shows you a path without necessarily doing it in focus, if that makes sense.
Well, look, I'm looking forward to kind of delving into with you further, but just for the folks to understand, just get a bit of context, I think a bit of what I might have mentioned this before, but just to reiterate, I think a lot of what prompted our initial kind of interactions with each other, at least as of recent, was that I was kind of tweeting out how, based off the current buy and burn we've seen, that if we kind of extrapolate that burn over the next 2 or so years, that we could be seeing very, very, very significant numbers. And, I was pointing out how, those numbers could be so big that I'm frankly surprised not a lot more people are talking about it. But you rightly pointed out that, hey, Brandon, you need to sober up a bit, because there's one thing you forgot to consider, which was kind of how the price aspect. Because essentially, folks, what we're experiencing now with both Pulse Chain and Pulse X, volumes are kind of trending down. But if if we're likely to behave in the future as we've behaved in the past, volume is likely to increase somewhat parabolically. And so I kind of postulated that so with the buy and burn, but the price is kind of an interesting thing here. It's kind of an interesting kind of wrench in the wheel that acts as a bit of a suppressant on the parabolic shape of the result of the buy and burn. So maybe it's more linear. And so there's a lot of interesting considerations in this regard. like will the price lag the volume, right? Therefore giving, you know, the buy and burn a chance to kind of you know, be ahead by a little bit, right? Like there's all these different sort of interesting considerations. And while I do want to get there, if you don't mind, I would want to go back to something you mentioned, which I personally thought was kind of interesting, because I think it's unique in regards to how you kind of got involved in this whole space. You mentioned how you were going through maybe a bit of like personal development, and you ran into someone who was like a hexagon involved in like self-help and sci-vibe. So just to understand a bit better, are you saying that like did you read sci-vibe? Did that help you at all? Like was that your introduction to RH and everything?
Well, at the point that I met this person, I had adopted a program that was working for me. And then I had even found that I had a lot stronger liking than I even did in high school for philosophy and for Stoicism. And that's where the idea of Stoic thinking, like, basically there's a lot of principles that sci-fi uses that are already present in other older material, which basically I found already, which was where I was already on a certain path. So when I saw sci-fi, I read a couple passages, but it wasn't what helped me. I was already on my path. The crypto that Richard had built is what have hope for my financial future, for my financial freedom. So, I mean, I praise Richard constantly for the crypto he's built, and I do believe that from what little I've read from sci-fi, that it is a good book. Nothing I've read from it has been at all what I thought incorrect, useless, or like, it's all very positive and great thinking, really good reaffirming thinking. It's just I already had found a working set of good thinking. It's just a lot of it matched. And so I'm just hearing the same principles I'm already using, but reworded. And when I hear that, I go, well, these are re-quoting what I think is very smart principles. And however you get to these, he's giving these out to people for free. This is good work. How can I not respect that? How can I not admire that? Even if it didn't help me personally, it's synergistic with what did.
I see. So okay, and what I'm also trying to get at here is, how did you find this community, this space? Did you first get onboarded through XRP? Was it straight kind of Richard Hart? Like how did you get?
I had a friend. He's passed away now, unfortunately. His name was Paul. He absolutely was a hardcore Richard loving hexagon that had put his entire money into it, made tons of money, and then had bought back in, trying to make even more. And he pretty much just screamed from the rooftops how awesome it was and would not stop. He had 4 programming degrees. So he became my friend. I got to know him. And so I finally got over to his house one day because he was too paranoid to even share any of this stuff over the internet. And so when I'm finally at his house, he's like, okay, this is how you make a wallet. Now make sure there's no cameras in your apartment watching me. Yes. Okay, all right, follow the MetaMask thing to the letter. And yeah, learning crypto security. Like, okay, all right, you're very intense about this. And I got to ask more questions, learn a little more. And I got $1,000 in November 21st and bought at 23 cents. It was awesome.
Right on. No,
but it was a dip right there. Like, you can go and look. And then I went, you know what? I watched it go up after that. It was exhilarating. Then I watched it went down. And I'm like, wait, what? So I got into watching the charts, and then I bought around December or 10th or 11th. Again, the next local low, because I saw it forming. And I'm like, yeah, that's a low. And everyone's like, how do you know? Like, you're just here. You don't know anything. I'm like, that's it. I'm grabbing it. And yeah, then I got my first FOMO buy-in Christmas Eve, basically. So anyone who knows the chart history will cringe at that one, because I did not sell it like I planned to. The FOMO got to me because I was going to sack just on the 31st, just before for Pulse X, and then I'm like, no, I'm going to go higher. So I learned my FOMO right there and then. but I still caught every dip on the way down. Like I really, when you listen to not your keys, not your crypto, don't trust middlemen. You get these constant reaffirming messages of exactly the protocols you need to do to be safe, to get in, to not basically have the worst security in the world or start talking out my butt, like to have the Dunning-Kruger effect explained. As I listened to Richard Hart, I mean, at first, when my buddy Paul was trying to get me to listen, I'm just cringing. I'm like, oh, this guy is disgusting. But I mean, I learned a trick once upon a time to close my eyes and just listen to the words coming out of someone's mouth. And there, eventually I heard, oh, there's Stephen Hawking, Einstein, Gandhi. Like, there's principles. There's actual intelligent thought here. And it seems that he honestly actually wants to help people. You don't see that a lot from people who are already well off and financially secure in their lives to still give a crap about the little people. And I always love the underdog, and it feels to me that Richard Hart supports the underdog. And then, as being a part-time alcoholic from between high school until recently, I may have spent a lot of time in bars and karaoke. So the Hexa community and a big fat guy in a Gucci suit twerking, I mean, I cringe, but at the same time, I'm tee-hee-hee-hee.
Yeah.
Like,
it kind of mixes, yeah.
Reactions at the same time, cringe, and be like, this is awesome.
Yeah, man. Oh, that's kind of interesting. So you mentioned how you mentioned a couple of things, but one thing I want to hover on is you talked about how you kind of managed to catch some local bottoms, and I want to pick your brain on how you did that, because one thing I like to harp on is the fact that valuations matter. Like, you can buy a great asset at a bad price, and that can be highly unprofitable. Or you could buy a terrible asset at a fantastic price, and that can just so happen to be profitable. Like, valuations matter a great deal. And so I think, I'm one who tends to argue for weighted dollar cost averaging. Like, try and time it a bit. And no one method is perfect. I'm not trying to suggest that. Like, for example, I've been using the 4-hour and 2-hour RSI on the on Pulse Chain to kind of attempt to time kind of like local lows, and it's not a perfect indicator whatsoever, but it's better than nothing. It's better than randomness. So, what are your thoughts? Like, how have you been attempting to kind of look at scooping up local bottoms?
Well, I overthink everything, so I look at a lot of factors. When you see the math model, you'll really understand how many variables I'll try to take into consideration about a thing. But I mean, when you talk about valuations, it's an interesting proposition from the beginning, because valuations to someone in Wall Street will be completely the kind of metric I was trying to use with my math model in some senses, to be analytical, mathematical, and predictable. And in crypto, valuations are based on sentiment. Like, how do you give a valuation for a Tickle Me Elmo or a Beanie Baby or a Furby, if you knew any of these crazes where suddenly these things at Christmas, just because kids wanted them, were worth thousands of dollars for a normally like $20 toy, like NFT crazes. So how do you give a valuation to a speculative asset that has that's uses like it still has the same use as Bitcoin? So basically, I logically started to try and look at it all and break it down in a whole long line of thinking of what's going on in the actual markets, from stocks to bonds, to the Fed interest rate, to Bitcoin, treating it as essentially the commodity, and digital gold, as it is the first thing to prove that you can move value without having to trust a bank or a middleman. And from there, anything that can improve on that value, you've got Ethereum, the essentially silver standard, going right behind Bitcoin. And I look at those two assets and I kind of track what's going on in them a little bit when I try to think about what's going on. So the market was easy and predictable through 2022 as it was constantly downhill. And in that, the trend is your friend until the end. And every time you start to bust out a trend, that's one of your path channels. And okay, you've got the top side of the trend and the bottom side of the trend. And obviously, as you're getting to one side of the trend or the other, if it's staying in the trend, your odds of it switching directions are getting a lot larger. But you never know where that trend's actually going to end. But 22, very steady trend downwards. So I just got here. It was pretty easy. And now, at least from my thinking, so, okay, we've got the trend, but what else? Because sometimes it dips below the trend, or sometimes it pops up before the end of the trend. And I got very good at calling the tops and shorting Apple on the way down as a stock while I'm picking up the bottoms in HEX. Kind of as an act of principle, I didn't want to encourage people to sell HEX in a bear market, so I wasn't calling tops. And plus, I'm buying for the long haul, thinking each one is the actual bottom. So I'm not paying attention for tops there, but I'm watching them in Apple. But as I get to see Deck Screener and I get to see Trade View and I start to watch volume matters. And there's two different types of bottoms that I've really gotten easy for seeing. And it's your basic sudden drop and yank back bottom because you've overcorrected too far too fast. And that one is marked by insane volume increases. Like suddenly the volume is spiking, the RSI is out of whack like you're looking for. I'm looking at this MACD as well, seeing where it's in the cycle. I will swap between the 15-minute, the 1 hour, the 4 hour, the daily, and the weekly to see which ones are all leading which directions. And a lot of times, if it's out of place in the daily and weekly, it might have been a panic sell or a whale game, and that might have been a great scooping opportunity. The other bottoms where I'm usually calling them out or catching them is what's more like seller exhaustion. And you see us, basically it's jumping the gun on a cup and saucer formation, because I'm watching the curving effect happen and I'm watching the volume die off and I'm liking where I'm seeing the RSI and the MACD. And all of a sudden it becomes clear to me that, yeah, sellers are reaching exhaustion, and basically this is a moment for buyers to pick up. And then I'll double check the stock market and also look at the headwinds and be like, is earning reports coming out? Is there anything that's going to cause panic, this and that, or even something that could be bolstering? As finally in this year, we got the reaffirming effect that has been very exciting. The Bitcoin rallied every time we had a bank pop like a pimple. So as Wall Street gets its spanking for gross negligence and misspending, crypto might rally. That's an exciting prospect, instead of being worried about Grayscale yanking it down in the same direction, because we are seeing some market rebalancing. So I definitely overthink that, because the NASDAQ is overextended where 7 stocks are leading the whole rally. But we haven't seen serious conviction or rotations, but we have seen rotations. And what rotations are is the market will trade for recessionary conditions or inflationary conditions or growth conditions. And each one of these will dictate whether commodity is going to be stronger, bonds are going to be stronger. And so, yeah, the NASDAQ, which is your tech risk on sector, has been rallying hard this year. It's overextended and ready for a pullback, due for a pullback, or at least a 10%. Tech stocks are, unfortunately, venture capitalists, as we saw through SVB, a huge, significant factor to also the hold to maturity funds that banks locked themselves into, basically bonds. So it's likely we're going to see the NASDAQ correct hard, but the Dow Jones and some of the small caps in other sectors and commodities have seen rotations in. And even though the Fed did another interest rate hike, which will probably cause more banks to crash, we're seeing reinflation. So we're seeing a hot, icy phenomenon in the markets where, although there's a lot of recessionary conditions, there is basically growth conditions where we could have a mini growth cycle leading some hyperinflation. And who knows how long that could last, but that could be essentially what wraps around our 24-25 cycle, where we're seeing our next bull run before the Fed comes out swinging even harder in disbelief of how bad they lost control. So the market is an interesting beast that takes up a lot of my time to monitor, to try and understand exactly what stocks are doing. Like, I mean, the whole stock market seemed like it was panicking and crashing in 2022. But if you were holding lean hogs or Hershey's or Lockheed Martin, you were like, what recession? This is crypto, man. We're mooning, and they're singing Kumbaya in moon suits, and all crypto bros are crying. Like, there's always a bull market somewhere. As much as it's doom and gloom. So I talk about all that, but crypto was essentially invented for the lack of trust in bankers. And so it should essentially rally as we see some banks in financial stress. Like, one thing that might get your video banned or your YouTube channel suspended. We'll dive
let's mention all the things.
Let's dive into Blackstone. So Blackstone, you know what BlackRock is, right? The BlackRock and Vanguard owning about 15% of everything of the world. Blackstone, so they bought stocks owning the world. Blackstone bought property owning the world. So at the same time, we have housing prices inflating like nuts. You have corporate participation, taking easy loan money policies from the Fed. The same way BlackRock brought up all our stocks, they're buying up houses and doing Airbnb rentals and jacking up and inflating those prices. So as much as there's a bunch of homeowners and non-existent, like right now, existing home sales are plummeting down because existing homeowners don't want to sell because they're locked into low interest rate mortgages at 2, 3, and 4%. But you have new home sales exploding. You can't build them fast enough because there's still some demand in the market. I'm going off on such a tangent here, describing the entire market here. But so, I mean, the house market is trending in this direction where you've still got some boom kind of kicking in, but new house building is picking up, and you've got a whole bunch of homeowners that don't want to part with them. So what you have is, do you have a lack of revenue? But it's not just homeowners. You've got Blackstone involved too. So now homeowners aren't counting on their properties for income. They're counting on their jobs. And we have one of the highest job employments ever in a recession. So people aren't defaulting at the rate they should be on their homes. They are on car loans, which is a whole different bubble this time.
The car loan is
instead, but we're still concentrating on home sales because the elephant in the room is Blackstone owning up a lot of residential and commercial real estate. And after the pandemic, a lot of people didn't return to the commercial real estate. They've stayed remote working. So those real estate prices have plummeted. Nobody really wants to. So I mean, although there's some housing sales, Blackstone is down hugely on their properties. And if they start unloading them, they'll hit realized losses. They locked in their investors' funds around November or December of 22 and basically started refusing to return any investor funds and started defaulting on payments. The first one was $230-something million. The next one was $300-something million payment default. And the next one was over $500 million, totaling over $1.1 billion not paid in default I bounce my credit card payments from Blackstone on their debts. So they can't get more credit. They can't refinance. And if they pop and go bankrupt, then you finally got where the vultures are going to be parting it and selling it to get their money back, which means the selling of that real estate, which could affect the market. So you finally see where some of the stress liars, where BlackRock will probably have to scoop up Blackstone to stop real estate prices from crashing that bad. It's insane the amount of Ponzi'd up stuff that they've got from all the mass money printing. But then at the same rate, you got to adjust your perspective and go watch Dan Aykroyd in the 80s cracking jokes about what everybody would pay that seems so astronomical and so outrageous. And today it's almost essentially what we're paying. Or even better yet, build a time machine and go kidnap somebody from 1950s sitting at a diner who just paid 25 cents for a coffee and a pie and take him to Starbucks. He will die of a heart attack thinking he's having a nightmare. This is fake. There's no way this is true. So when I say that one day, we can't fathom it right now, but the idea that you're going to pay $2,500 for a pie and a coffee at Starbucks, that's impossible. That could never happen. No, frog in a boiling pot. The idea is, how long does it take to get there? If it tries to get there by next year, revolt, guillotines, things are going sideways. Now, if they can make it last, say, 30 to 50 years before you're paying $2,500 for a cup of coffee and a pie, suddenly you're talking a more realistic factor. So that's why they try to control the 2.5 inflation rate, which is why crypto is so important. And when I understand all of these factors about the Bernie Madoff, the corruption in Wall Street, how pension funds constantly disappear, Yellow Trucking's whole pension funds disappeared and they're going bankrupt. Like basically everything is so propped up that they reshuffle the game. It's musical chairs and you have no idea how to actually trust it. It's not as transparent as you'd think. And the blockchain is transparent. You don't have to trust on middlemen. There's still mistakes. It's still a game of musical chairs. But to me, it's one I can understand a little bit better because I can understand the code. But then how do you gauge the sentiment? Well, I've learned to like top signals and bottom signals in the market between Island Boys doing a rap song and some other things. But looking at crypto then, okay, so I've got my basic theories about whether Bitcoin should rally or Ethereum should rally or whether they should go down. And then I even started to look where BNB started to become a leading in that and Bitcoin was kind of lagging. Like it's funny, some of them take the lead or start to lag depending on what I've read in the news. But all in all, they seem to be backing the 4-year cycle completely. And in that, all right, let's say that crypto, because people hate the banks alone, that's a good enough reason to want to be able to trade their value without a middleman, will always have value. It's not going anywhere. And with inflation, it'll have probably increasing value. Okay, but how do you do a real valuation for it when you're looking at market cap and everything else? Now, if we're talking about Wall Street, when we get into the idea of looking at a valuation, you're looking at the profitability, the statement of cash flows, the expenses to operate the company. You're looking at the assets the company holds. So, I mean, this company holds 3 skyscrapers, both worth $30 million each. So that's $100 million on paper. So theoretically, their stock should be worth at least that, because if they go bankrupt, we can sell those properties and parts it and get reinvested for our supply. So evaluation starts to look at that, and then it includes the profitability, especially if they're going to do things like dividends or buybacks. How will that revenue possibly go into the liquidity to affect price or even sentiment, as people might rally around a company that is doing well? Okay, evaluation matters. Now, sentiment and valuation starts to stop mattering when Tesla's valuation pre-stock split last year, where it went to a 3-way stock split, should have been around like maybe $100. So we're talking like a $30 to $40 valuation if you're looking at the cash flows and books. It's trading at $160. So it's hyperinflated over its actual valuation that mathematicians would look at. So there's the Tina argument. But that's where we need a correction, because there is a whole bunch of overspending, a tightening cycle that has to happen. They need to slow down inflation. NASDAQ's overinflated. We'll see some prices come down, and I think it will eventually get a lot closer to its valuation, because at its valuations at the top of the market, it would have had to last year open, or this year be opening a factory every single day that was already full of cars ready to sell when it opened.
Are you suggesting that Tesla is overvalued?
Well, when it was at $400 a share, which was $1,200 a share pre-split, that was if you were to look at the financial way that an accountant would do the valuation, yeah. So there's a lot of Tesla bros hating you right now. I don't say this loud enough because we live on Twitter too, and I praise the Twit god. The algos are not favorable if you're mean to Tesla. So I picked on Apple instead.
Yeah, so, all praise to Elon.
Well, I mean, at least there's some semblance of free speech, and I will say I'm at the nerd level that the community notes invited me to apply to do more and become like basically the Wikipedia edit button, being one of those people. Like, wow, thanks, Elon. So I did my application. We'll see if I get the power to be able to sit there and go, you really said that? Here's some facts. Let me edit your tweet and put a little note at the bottom. And cite the source. All that. But anyway, I'm not saying I'm gonna get that power. Who knows? I probably shouldn't get
Best
that power.
Of luck. I hope you do.
I'm going off on a tangent. Back to Tesla. So it is still overvalued at its current state if you're using those kinds of metrics. So now you've got the Elon Musk charisma that is crypto-ish, where he does a tweet about a dog coin and it goes Mooney. So yeah, he's got some power where he can create a whole mentality and psychology where people just invest because he's charismatically saying his company's going to be the best. It's the best thing to do. So you're basically giving him tons of money, and every dip in Tesla is like alimony payment, baby money, baby mama money, baby mama money, baby mama money. Twitter money, Twitter money, Twitter money, baby mama money. As he's hemorrhaging money on Twitter and all the. No, sorry, he at least is bringing freedom of speech, and I can pick on him. I could actually do that. I know the algo would slightly suppress the tweet, but it wouldn't delete it. I wouldn't get banned. I wouldn't whatever, and that is nice. So. Continuing off back to the valuations, crypto, where I got fascinated was the moment of like, okay, well, Ethereum's great, but like, you're telling me these protocols, but like, where does the value come from? People are just buying it, which is kind of the Ponzi argument. If you're relying on the next person to think it is more valuable, to speculate more value in being able to trust without a bank, to hate the banks even more than you did, essentially, which I mean is not unfeasible with the way bankers act. But anyways, how do you do evaluation? But meanwhile, we've got metrics like, well, Uniswap makes this much revenue. Okay, awesome. So they distribute it to the Uniswap token holders? No. So why is it $70 a token? Because, man, they make so much revenue. But I mean, the share, there's no you can't go after that revenue. You're not related to that revenue. You're not entitled. Like the whole idea of owning a share of a company, especially when you're at the opening, is investing in that company's future profitability. That you will see some sort of return for it. And okay. But then Paul Sachs comes along and goes, yeah, we're going to take some of the money we make and use it for buybacks. Okay, but then you're going to dump on our head later like Apple. No, we're going to burn it, throw in a dumpster, delete it forever. Oh, so the revenue your business makes, the revenue I can project and calculate and do evaluation on, is going to go into the liquidity to show what it could do for price if no one was buying or no one was selling. And that's how I first made the model, like making limited variables, showing this mechanic where you guys, this is amazing because if you can actually get your head around the business model of this and project the volume on the DEX, figure out how popular it's going to be, project what you think the revenue for the year is going to be for that business, you can actually see what effect that could have on price. And that is a Wall Street trick. And that is part of our crypto. That got me so super excited. And I'm listening in the Telegram rooms as everyone's bickering, calling it a gimmick. And I hear Richard Hart specifically say, I won't play the what if game. Solar flares could take out the internet. I'm not playing what ifs. I'm like, hey, I'm OCD and I'm really good at math. I can play the what if game for you, Richard. So my first model of this was called the what if game. And then I slowly kept expanding upon this thing to show here's a valuation model. And then I started cramming it down everyone's throat. And then KG and Don even bought it. Like, yeah, we want to pay dividends instead of buybacks. I'm like, actually, dividends are pretty good too. Why can't I get both? But whatever. Dividends are pretty good too. Because look, now you've got a wallet. I can do valuations on it. And I can project the revenue, the dividends. Like people, you can watch AT&T stock and Verizon stock literally go up at quarterly cycles for people buy them for the dividend payment and then dump them again. So you like the stock has value because people want a share of the profits the company made. And now I'm like, okay, so I can hold a time dividend token and get paid a dividend of the share of fees instead of buybacks. I'm seeing that. And then of course I ranted about buybacks so much. Of course they came up with a way to do it for their IM token and even for their time token. Holy crap. All right, so we got dividends and buybacks. And while I'm going on about that, I hear Mintra building way back in the day in Gerardo, and he's like, yeah, you can stake it for some share of Pulse, and yeah, we might use some of our fees to also do buybacks. Dividends and buybacks. Okay, so now NFTs I don't really get the value of. I'm not going to know which of NFT is the one that I want to buy, but owning a share of an NFT marketplace where I know that NFTs will have value, I know they're not going away, and I know people will speculate on them, and now I can do valuations on just the speculative nature of the community or that market. And now, wow, there's a whole different way of thinking about the value of all of these, which is a lot more grounding for me, where I can get a center from. And then while I've been here, I've had some people kind of school me on, you know, the value of memes, the fact that people do just love whimsical crap. Sometimes it's too much to understand all this complicated stuff, and they do want to just say, YOLO, screw the man. What's the most obnoxious thing that every smart person hates? Let me buy that. Yeah. So, and that has its own power too. Hence the Bed Bath and Beyond and GameStop and AMC phenomenons in the market, where you saw a couple hedge funds go broke. Yay. You know, the mania won, but then the mania was dumb, inexperienced, and the hedge funds that didn't die came back and destroyed all that. So, like, I like getting in on the groundwork of building technology that eventually the banks might want to copy, that gives us a way to not have to use the banks, that gives me hope for the freedom of speech and for the freedom of movement, for democracy, for the actual idea of sharing ideas, communicating, and trying to figure out census without an oligarchy or totalitarian short group of people dictating all the terms of my life. 15-minute cities.
Yeah, man. And God, and like especially in the case of Canada, when we had the the situation with the big cough and there were the truckers protesting, the fact that our prime minister decided to shut off funding for people sending money so they can buy sandwiches and food.
Shut off funding. A peaceful protest that was loud and rowdy. It was annoying. It was obnoxious, but peaceful. Was funded by peaceful donators. Those donators had their accounts frozen. An impeachment of their sovereign rights. There is a Canadian Charter of Rights. I encourage everyone to read it. I must have been in a really rare school because it was actually part of my grade school classes.
I think you were, because I don't see that being taught at all. Like, you have to go out of your way to learn that. Like, I took political science, favorite class I've ever taken in my life, and that's the only goddamn time it was mentioned. They don't teach in civics, at least not schools I went to. I went to Catholics, so pretty comparable what they teach in publics, except less religion stuff. But in regards to the civics, I mean, I can't imagine it's wildly different. So yeah, man, no, they don't teach that a lot, and the fact that happened is insane. And unfortunately, I don't think Canadians they definitely don't have that kind of French fire in them, where hey, this off to the kind of the trenches whenever this latest thing goes wrong, not to kind of overgeneralize or make not I don't want to make the issues that the French people are dealing with seem minuscule. That's not what I'm trying to say, but the French do often take the streets in a way that Canadians most definitely don't. And that was insane to see in Canada. And it really highlights the importance of, I think, having a separate economic system that is controlled in large part by code and not the whims of the people. I mean, people like Richard Art famously say that, at the end of the day, these are kind of socially enforced mechanisms, right? And to some extent that is true. But more or less, you're dealing with the rules of code and less so the whims of individuals. And we've seen what happens with the whims of individuals who can just shut down peaceful protesters and, the transfer of monetary energy to and from peaceful protesters who sure may be annoying. If you're like the craziest kind of pro jab person, you can make arguments as to, if we're really trying to steel man the other case as to how destructive this potential could be, yada, yada, yada. Even if you grant all that, at the end of the day, it was peaceful protest. It might have been very problematic, very controversial, very annoying peaceful protests, but they were peaceful protests. and that was insane. And so I just think that really highlights the importance of this whole enterprise we're dealing with, not just for the freedom aspect, but the making something of yourself, being able to invest in something that can grow and give you a piece of financial freedom, and to have that freedom not be molested at the whims of powerful individuals, I think is very, very powerful. Do you have
Well,
anything
if
to
you
add
want
there
to
before we
dive,
go on? Yeah.
sorry to cut you off, but
No,
before you
go
get
ahead.
too far on this, if you want to dive right into the hypocrisy of it, I love to put things in really simple terms sometimes for people, because maybe this should be a meme. We had truckers peacefully go and invade the streets of Ottawa and honk their horns a lot so that Justin couldn't sleep much, and he had to leave town to go on a stress-free vacation and claim he had COVID. Now, that because of that, he decided, well, he's got to make people pay and shut down their bank accounts, freeze out their ability to pay. I mean, that does a lot to a person in our day and age. Like, that can cause you to lose your home, not be able to eat. Like, it's not, we don't live in as much of a cash system, so a lot of people weren't necessarily prepared when that happened. And to not have your bank account is almost like a social credit score to totalitarianism. So then on the flip side of things, you have someone go ahead and fund. Have you seen Canada is Dying, the documentary on YouTube? I suggest watching that. It'll talk about the safe drug supply and the whole mission that has been led there. And you can go to Vancouver or Toronto or London, Ontario, and you can look at the streets and you can see how the streets are getting overcrowded. Now, they're not honking horns, but they're sitting there living in tents, smoking their drugs, blowing it in people's faces. So you still have a tent city, but instead of truckers playing music, you have people dying on the streets from poverty and drugs.
This is Vancouver or
Vancouver, Toronto, even London. It's exploded as a problem. And meanwhile, the guy who funds all that and thinks it's a great idea, what happens to him? Oh, he just gets to keep toting around getting photo ops. So where do we live in a fair system? The idea of the Canadian Charter of Rights, or even the American Constitution, is that it's not rules for us. It's rules for the government to stop totalitarianism. So this is a whole different political.
Yeah, there's a whole other rabbit hole.
It's like, we're here for crypto, but I mean, that's where blockchain technology, depending on what blockchain you're with, can be a political statement. That's where XRP is building for the banks, and you've got Chia, a whole different type of network that is also building for ESG. I'm like, oh, that feels like the biggest evil in the world. Even BlackRock has admitted that's a scam, but there's money there. And then you've got cypherpunks in all different kinds of moods and mentalities. And I do love the philosophy behind Pulse Chain. And no, the middlemen, no. The whole idea of Bitcoin is trustless sending with no middlemen. And so, yeah, the ability to do valuations, to have that metric added, and to have Richard do that and basically bring sliced bread to the marketplace. Like, once upon a time, all your bread was baguettes. That's all you could buy was baguettes. And then one genius came with sliced bread, and then everybody had to slice it. So since Richard threw in the buy and burn, you have a whole bunch of projects building on Pulse Chain. Internet Money, Mintra, Power City, Fiat, which also has a subset of projects, which FU.
Fucks and
yeah, you said it. I don't want to say it.
It's all right. We mentioned COVID. The algorithm's already fucked, so.
Yeah. We're trying to bomb your channel into the Stone Age here.
Yeah, I'm gonna be.
Oh, that was also one of the things I got told when I first came here. A bunch of people were bugging me that I was John McAfee coming back from the background, that I had faked my death, and that I'm back to tell you folks exactly what you need to do. And I'm like, no, I'm just his illegal clone version V2B.
Right.
That was the joke I went with. But I do have, like, I had not actually watched him enough to have any idea before I got to this community. Then I watched and I'm like, oh man, I can't even, didn't I see the similarities? Okay, I'm just gonna have to lean into this. But
Get
I'm
some
definitely not,
tattoos.
I'm not the great John McAfee by any means, but apparently I do have a bit of a political craw in my foot. So anyway, I do love the value of blockchain, and yeah, unless you've got some more questions, we can get back on track and go into the math model if you want to see how depth my mind went on those variables.
Yeah. No, I do have a lot more questions, but we've been hinting at it so much. I think the people deserve to finally get into the real meat and potatoes here. Why don't we start talking about your model here? Because we've been hinting at it in so many respects. While you pull it up, I don't know if you want to share your screen, but
On the way.
yeah, because we're talking about valuations here. We're talking about buying dips. We're talking about potential. We're talking about what factors we need to consider in regards to kind of reasonably speculate as to what may happen here in the future. And I think the fact that you kind of put the time into to build out a model to kind of put some of these abstract thoughts into more concrete terms, I think is deeply interesting. So why don't we, without further ado, start to kind of delve into it here. So what are we looking at?
Well, this is an Excel spreadsheet. So I call this it got nicknamed the crystal ball because everyone's like, no one has a crystal ball in the markets. No one can see the future. And I got way too OCD with this. So if we dive into the what if game where it started, when I was actually quoting Richard, this thing, let me show you as I zoom out the size and scope of this beast.
Oh, wow.
So at full zoom out, yeah, you start to realize this is a 20-year model. And I have to make this thing so much bigger to be a lot more accurate. And so in a gist of it, I had to look at a whole bunch of mathematical things. So, okay, what did I look at? I had to figure out the liquidity pool size that would exist for the asset. So that way I could figure out how it's going to be affected. And the liquidity, actually, I still have to do some adjustments. That number needs to be twice as big. The liquidity ended up 2 trillion tokens, which I never anticipated. So I've got this model adjusted to the wrong size. Let me see if I can get that right here, because I threw in a scaling option because I had to with testnets. There we go. That's about the amount of tokens. Well, actually, to start, yeah.
So very briefly, before we continue to delve further into it, what were you hoping to achieve with the creation of this?
Well, everyone was calling the buy and burn a gimmick. They didn't understand why it should hold any value. They were essentially calling it a tax on people. And I wanted to prove mathematically, step by step, so that people wouldn't argue that, hey guys, look, this is the revenue. Uniswap charges these fees too, and even more. So it's not a tax imposed. Now, here's how the buy and burn works. Here's how you can see supply disappear over time, which means less to dump on your head over time. This is how you can see how it can affect price because of how liquidity pools can function in Uniswap v2 and PancakeSwap and all the rest. So I built a liquidity pool, and basically, like, because that math is as simple as X times Y equals K. All right. So one side of the pool is.
I'm already intimidated. Just
Pardon?
I just want to say that I'm already intimidated. Once we get into multiplication division,
Okay. Well,
that's where I start to get scared.
This is where the model starts. Is say you have a pool with 10,000 tokens, and then you have 10,000 stablecoin tokens. So $10,000 on the other side. Oh, sorry, that's our multiplication thing. 10,000 on the other side. Well, you get a constant number. It's kind of like building a seesaw or teeter-totter on top of a base. So, sorry, equals our first pool multiplied by our second pool. It's that simple. This number right here, let's give it some commas, a format that's easier to see for people. There we go. Now you guys can easily see 10,000, 10,000. So essentially, whenever you do a trade on Uniswap, this is how slippage works. This is how a Uniswap trade on V2 works. Let's say I see this token, and we'll call this Furby token, just because Furbies were obnoxious crap. And I see this Furby token, and I see that it's $1 a token. I think it's a good buy, and I have $10,000. So here's the stablecoin side. Here's the token side. Okay. So I have $10,000. I think that's a great idea. So I'm going to go ahead and dump that in there. So that makes that $20,000 now, right? Well, it doesn't change the K number. The K number has to remain constant. So it doesn't get me 10,000 tokens. Essentially, 5,000. Oh, there's our K number. So what I did was spent $10,000 and only got $5,000. Now there's $20,000 and 5,000 tokens left in this pool. So the price was $1 token. But now if you divide, so this equals the money divided by the leftover token supply, look at that. We have a price of this token of $4. But we go over here and replicate this exact same trick with what we spent. Sorry. Control-C, Control-V. And look at that. We paid. Oh, I moved it down. Just get up to the same row. Whatever. You guys, that's the whatever.
Sure.
$2 is what you paid. So price was $1. You paid $2. That's the slippage. That's how you get affected with the price moving around you as you're putting it up. And then this is the price afterwards. So the current balanced ratio. Because the base underneath always has to stay the same, at least in the V2 of Uniswap model, the X times Y model. So small liquidity pools can be very brutal for slippage, and that's why we want to see much larger pools for much less slippage, so that a $10,000 buy doesn't get 50% slippage. So that gives you an idea of liquidity size and how a pool works. So I had to figure out some math and figure out, well, if I change one side of the pool, I need the other side to automatically change. So essentially, okay, then I can make my pool, since I know the number is 100 million, make it the static number. Okay, so I make my 100 million the static number. Now I can just put in my dollar amount and make this field equal. So I'm playing around with Excel, and I realized, well, I need all three of these to be able to move around. So essentially, I eventually built the math for what I call here these cells, the month cells. These are the liquidity pools being run at the beginning of the month, the buy that's happening from the buy and burn, and then the resulting pool after the buy and burn. So by stacking these functions in a row in a certain order, I get to be able to start making adjustments to either side of the pool, or to even increase or decrease the K number, which is what I was doing with that first variable up here in gray, in order to go back here and increase the token supply as I'm adjusting basically all of the liquidity math. And one of the insane ways I can show that off, which will make people cringe, is right here in cell A17. Here's some simple algebra for you. So I try not to flaunt or get in front of people. Like, I realize you can get lost in the weeds. So simply enough, this field right here, the orange field under the second column under B, is always showing the buy amount that the buy and burn is executing, depending on the variables that I put into that. So then I looked at Uniswap as the base model, the amount of volume it did daily. And then I set a bullish in terms scale so I could adjust to that. And I assumed, what if we could do about 10% of their volume daily? I mean, we're doing 20 million daily volume in Pulse X right now. And right now, like, that is a lot less effect than we expected to see. Like in the first month, we were hitting, and this is where I had not anticipated the first month to be so ferocious with volume and then peter off. So I had built it as an S curve, and that's a whole different model up. But I included an S curve in my model, so all the volume starts low and runs up. So I have to almost ignore the first month with this math model now and go from the current point. And I'm gonna have to go back and retroactively add the insane first month of volume into the math model with some static information for it. And I haven't had a chance to do that or think about how to do that. Again, I'm trying to scale a business. I don't have time to be building this model in such detail where this is me doing this by a month-by-month basis. There isn't one buy and one sell per month. It's happening on a daily basis. So as I just showed how slippage over in the garbage data can be affected, well, I'm having one huge buy go off from the buy and burn that eats a lot of slippage. So it's not an accurate show of how many tokens it might have gotten day over day, where people might be selling day over day, keeping the price low, what's actually happening right now. And I have all my sell-offs happen at once with huge slippage because I'm only doing it monthly in the first. So monthly, 12 times a month, well, or 12 times a year, there's 365 days a year. I would at the very least have to be doing it weekly, which is 52 times instead of 12. But I should be doing it daily. So like this model has to essentially get, 12, 360, like it has to get 36 times bigger on just the first year. And then essentially I have it go year after year in the model afterwards. And this essentially has to get increased to at least weekly if I want to have something roughly accurate, because buys and sells are happening by the hour. And this is where the slippage is not tracked right in this model. But it does, over on the crystal ball, start to give us some projections. And I did build some graphs to kind of show us. So the variables it started to look at using Uniswap as the base model, I'm like, okay. True burn rate was when we got different testnet after different testnet. There was speculation about changes in Pulse X. I kept adopting the math model. Ignore that. Adoption rate, though, this is where I put into the S curve. I have this at very low. So 105% means next year there will be 105% of the users there is this year. Only 5% growth year over year. Now, even on the exponential table, when you looked at the sacrifice rate for Pulse X, you can see what 5% growth could have, but that could take 30 years. So the internet grew at a rate of 71% year over year. Crypto is growing at a rate of 114 year over year. Like when I say 71, I mean 171% of the year before the internet.
Right. That's what people understand. There's a compound effect.
Yeah, crypto is doubling every year. So this is me really lowballing the numbers. I have now cranked the liquidity up to about matching the actual supply we have, which is a giant K number. Here's where I put the LP size. So I had originally had a starting price. I think that is now accurate. I have adjusted that starting price to relatively where it came out of the gate swinging, at least pre-bridge, when Pulse was equal to Pulse X, and Pulse was approximately that price. It was based off a whole bunch of things. It's just approximately a good starting place for me to use. And then I'm like, all right, so say I put $100 in. Now let's say we are doing 10% of Uniswap's business year over year. The idea there too is Uniswap had about when I was doing this, building this, a base user of about 1.5 million users or 1.5 million active wallets. So assuming it had 150,000 users to start, 10% of that, 10% bullish in terms, I started tracking user growth at the same time that I was tracking basically the idea of revenue growth year over year. So on a 5% timeline, this middle column tracks user growth. So at the end of 20 years, we're still only at 400,000 active wallets. That's really piddly. That's really stupid. There's no way we're going to be
These
that
are
small.
very conservative numbers. Yeah.
That's stupidly conservative. So let's at least put that at 10%. We go down to the 20, and we can see we broke 1 million. We could break 1 million in 20 years. I think so. That's still conservative as hell.
I think we break 1 million.
There's people rolling and screaming, going, "Crank that up!" I'm like, no, not yet.
Yeah.
So in here, one of the factors too that everybody game theory wise screamed was how many people got in on the Pulse X sacrifice just for Pulse? How many were going to trade it off, and what kind of damage were they going to do to it? What kind of price dump were they going to have? Well, we've seen the price dump. 8% doesn't cover it, because dropping down to the price is lower than that. I'm going to have to do first, I'm going to have to expand the number of digits in this row. Okay, so now I got to crank this number up. Well, how does 12% get us? Nope, the price is lower than that. I had used 20 a lot of times. Let's get to 15. Oh, price is lower than that. Let's get to 20. That was my favorite number. Oh, isn't that interesting? That's pretty close. Let's crank her up to 22. We've gotten down to that on a dip. But this is assuming the huge sell-off that maybe now, okay, 22% of the stackers want it out right off the bat. They dumped maybe an extra I still see it. No, I got to go back and really look at the numbers, because I'm just doing this by the seat of my pants.
Sure.
And I got to see where the liquidity actually started and how people have been removing and adding it, because I'm not sure what this is doing to the liquidity numbers, because I'm pretty sure another 3 trillion tokens didn't really hit the market, or if they had, they've been scooped up.
Can I ask you something real quick?
Because the price didn't go lower than that, right? And I'm not... now, interestingly enough, I did finally admit to people, this is still the sell-off. I had sells just dumped in here over and over and over. Let me get these out of here, because I am simulating market sells, because I'd rather do that than market buys, just to show you how powerful the buy and burn is. But like down at the bottom, you can see a series graph. Okay. And I have an adoption curve graph down here that's really modest, and I can get into the 5-year graph where you see price recovery, and even the 20-year graph. And on this very mild model right now, it would suggest that we could still see a 100x in our value over 20 years. And over 20 years, we've seen the devaluation of 95% of our currency. So like that alone says the buy and burn should outpace the rate of inflation devaluing our currency. That's a valuation I can get behind with some of the most conservative numbers ever, where I don't care where it moves to, because I'm looking at these buys over and over, affecting the market in this way. But realistically, I do think that we will see a lot more adoption than 10% year over year. So we could crank that up to 120% year over year, just to be polite. And I have an S curve modifying that adoption, but it does get us to about 5 million users after 20 years. But more so, what's important, 5 years, we're approaching over 500,000 users. That's kind of some impressive metrics, and suddenly it changes the future price of Pulse X a lot.
Now, is this just assuming just the effect of buy and burn?
Yeah, this is assuming just the effect of the buy and burn happening.
Now, that's a very big deal, because if you incorporate more buying than selling on the whole, then that's just even increasing these numbers.
Yeah, so essentially year over year, the variables that go into this are, at what rate is adoption occurring? Overall, what is the revenue level, and then I look at it like where I was just proving the functionality of how the buy and burn will compensate for people selling off and dumping into the price. Because in this model, like right here, you can see my projection. This insane model with no one buying off the open market except the buy and burn gets to destroy 3.2 trillion tokens. But this assumes that not a single person in the world is buying or DCAing into false X.
And that's over the course of the first year, you're saying?
Yeah, and that's the first year, and then it shows what this would do to price if that's the case. So I just make sure I have removed all the cells. Was I tampering with this at all?
And that's extremely significant, because over the course of the next 2 years, next bull market here, based off some of these numbers, we're looking maybe 6.5 around there, trillion being bought and burnt. And people got to consider that the total liquid supply is about 21 trillion. So that is a not at all insignificant portion of the liquid supply. That is a very significant portion of liquid supply here that's being bought and burnt. That's very interesting.
Yeah, and that's still like with this 10% user base like of Uniswap idea, yeah. And this is still like such low metrics. Like realistically, I mean, crypto is adopting where it's almost doubling year over year. And I'm saying that one of the cheaper, more gimmick dexes that could have more feature coming to it, like the volume that's capable. I don't know. Like I believe in S-curve adoption, so I have it ramp up slowly through the year with its power. And if I go to the what if game in here and actually look at how this is running right now, essentially this is actually really lowballed it, because this isn't quite right. Because right here we can see the burn, the buy pressure, because also this math model wasn't including dexes that were running at full burn instead of running at, we're giving about 20% of our stuff to burn. So
right, yeah,
this has been kneecapped because our first month saw a lot more than $2.9 million of buy pressure. So I still have to crank up this bullish in terms a little bit to get that matched up. And I think I got to crank it to 20% because of our V1 pools. Because I've got to go back and adjust the math, because here I have that 21% and see, like, it's part of it, like actual programming that I started to do in Excel. So changing that number, I got to go adjust it later. It's easier. Hey, look, $5.8 million. That's a little closer to what's been put into the buy and burn. And essentially, even with the massive sell-off we have that's dumped price to this exceptionally low number, with the buy and burn chipping off of it, we essentially can see that, hey, by the end of the year, we could get back over the sacrifice price again without a single other person other than the buy and burn chipping away at it. But that's where it has this price staying. Like, let me get into month 8 and expand that so you can see the price, because I never contemplated prices quite this low.
And
So,
that
yeah.
presumably helps out the situation, because the lower the price is, the easier a time the buy and burn has burning supply.
So I hope you can see this okay, where I'm expanding these numbers so you can see 3 digits of price. And you can see where, what's our current price right now, Brendan? I haven't even looked today for Pulse X.
40313.
So here's 40315 in month 2. But and okay, we can see it goes to 337, 3. So what the heck? Why? Yeah, 359. Yep. Then so this is slow. So month 6 months in, the buy and burn working alone, without anyone from the market buying, if all the sellers stopped selling, could restore price already to 4 zeros and a 4. And again, no further selling or buying in the market. And let's see here. Month 9. Month 10. Okay. All right. So there, month 12. So we're not actually back. Once we've expanded this, we can see it's actually a little bit slow recovering this. But hey, this is just the buy and burn working. This is where it's like, wow, you don't have to count on the next person to buy it to push the price up. Something is actually buying it, pushing the price up. So let's go ahead and make sure where it is now. Here we see by the end of year 2, the buy and burn has recovered above the sacrifice price for even the poorest of us. If they just have the patience and stop selling right now, the volume on Pulse X, the fees collected, could potentially do this just by the second year and get it above the sacrifice. This is not as moony as people used to love when I was looking at it. But if we jump ahead and we get to 5 years in the future, again, the buy and burn chipping away, you're not betting on market speculation the same way. We're at 2 zeros and a 1-4. Like, we have done a 12x above sacrifice price at the end of year 5.
Whoa, okay. So hold on. That's huge. So you're assuming if volume continues to, expand at kind of a similar rate we've been seeing, that after 5 years, we could be looking at a 12x over day 1 sac rate?
Yeah, and I'll go through the what if game here and show you. So yeah, this is where, wow, yeah, okay. So yeah, I expanded this to 7 decimals past the 0 for these. So realistically, yeah, we see our current price, and then here we can see a 1 in front of that current price by the end of year 2. So that essentially is a 4x from where we're at now, but a 1.13 from sacrifice price. Yeah. And yeah, it could double by the next year. Like, we start to almost see a doubling effect to the price year after year from that. It's pretty impressive here. So yeah, I have to keep expanding these to make these look, yeah, 7 decimal places for all of these. So yeah, realistically, we're looking at 5x's by the end of year 4 and 12, more than doubling by 5 the way I'm doing my S-curve. But let's look. So the graph kind of projects, coming from this sub-zero range to getting to 1/10 of a penny. Yeah, getting our 10x just from the buy and burn. And this would be with not adoption buying the token, but just using the DEX, using the chain, essentially. All the arbitrage coming through at the increase in volume should be able to have this kind of effect. And yeah, I really love this. So in this model, oh, oopsie, that's a typo. Here we go. That's 5 years. That's 5 years that's looking at. Over here is first year. So 1.6 trillion in the first year. My apologies. This is meant to be attached with this graph. So first, since first year. So yeah, first 5 years.
And not to mention too that the more buy and burn there is, the smaller and smaller and smaller the pool of potential supply that is available to buy there is.
Yeah. So we'll look at how the liquidity pool changes over time. So if we jump to 6 months, and we can see, like, in this, I think I have to readjust because I think we're currently sitting at a liquidity of 2 trillion tokens, which is why I'm a little off in my math, because after all the sell-off to get us to our price, we should be sitting at that token supply. So we probably were sitting at some lower liquidity. But because I don't think we have this much in the supplies, I'll have to go look in some detail.
Go to
so busy.
2.2.
I haven't gotten to update this math with the actual models that are going on. I just get to poke at the numbers and see it's running as intended and be so happy and gleeful.
Dude, this is extremely interesting. What I would love to see, sorry to interrupt you, but if if someone could like fund you and see if we can get like API keys for you to like get live data that you could feed into this. I don't know what you would need, like an Oracle and API, what it would take, but wouldn't that be super interesting if we can somehow like plug in live data into this, so you can like query the blockchain and like see in real time what the numbers are? I don't even know if that's possible, but if we can get those live numbers, that'd be very, very interesting. New sacrifice people.
Is there a reason I had this balanced like this?
Folks, in the meanwhile, like and subscribe. This is
Playing with
very, very interesting stuff. Yeah, no, these numbers are incredibly, incredibly interesting. Because guys, like this is an in-depth model, but we're talking about very large numbers being built up here. Yeah, go ahead.
My apologies. So I remember why I had it set at 8% and 800. So originally when I built this model, I thought Richard Hart likes small liquidity, so objects go up. So I copied the liquidity pool Hex was using, which is where the 1 starts on this. And I had it set to 250 because I thought, you guys are animals. Every time I looked at testnet, the liquidity was bigger. It got 250 times bigger. When I got to mainnet, it was 800 times larger with nearly 1 trillion tokens. About 8% of the supply dumped in, approximately 1.3 trillion or more, because some of it got market bought out, but that's the minimum amount that got bought in. That puts us at about 2.2 trillion tokens in the supply. That gets us, that's getting more to what happened. Let me tweak this just a little bit. There, I think use 12%, because then tokens got scooped out at large supply. So, sorry, I'm adjusting the math again. 1.3 trillion tokens is what this model would run like. And there we go. Price starts going up a little bit faster because the liquidity is not as saturated as I thought it was. Like, that was insane the way I cranked it up. That liquidity pool size was a scientific number that was ridiculous. 2 to the power of essentially 20 is already an insanely big number. Here we go. End of 5 years, 45x's from the buy and burn. That's the kind of minimal stuff I'm counting on. So yeah, if we get into the what if game, now the pools match a little better. So we've had some market buying, but we can see we go very quickly. Month 3, some market buying. It hasn't gotten as bad as 2.6, but my numbers are better here. And essentially, that many tokens available for sale in liquidity by the end of the first year, we're down to just 1.5 trillion tokens available in liquidity, and that's if no one in the market is buying it to make that number smaller to push price up.
Whoa, could you repeat that, please?
The buy and burn is chipping away at the tokens in liquidity, and that no one else is adding liquidity, no one else is selling. But we get under 1 trillion tokens by the 3rd year. The 2nd year is 1.5, and the 3rd year, we're already at 800 million tokens in the liquidity pool.
That's huge.
So the basically the crystal ball has a harder time, or the buy and burn has a harder time stealing tokens to sell them. So yeah, in the first year, another is a whole 1.3, but then the next 4 years, that's what this needs to be. The next 4 years, when you built a thing forever ago and haven't looked at it in months, you forget. The next 4 years, another 1.2 or almost 1.3. So it takes 4 years to do the burning that the first year did, because price is going up as volume's going up with adoption increasing. So we see a slowdown actually in the number of tokens. This is where you were wondering if we could see a straight line projection. And this is where, okay, without the market even buying, the buy and burn pushes up the price bad enough on liquidity that it can't do a straight line, that eventually the price will go up and up unless people keep dumping. So right now we've seen probably over 10% of the sacrifice dump into the supply. So what if after we start to recover some value and return to the sacrifice price, let's say we just, step in right here. What the hell? Month 10. And we dump another 1.7 trillion tokens on the market. Dump 10% of the supply outside the sacrifice. That's enough zeros? No, that's only 1.7 billion, isn't it? I need... There we go. So if another 10% drop happened in month 10, let's say, so now 20% of the tokens have been dumped. The price by month 12 is about where it is again. We can see on the price chart this big dump down, but then it starts slowly picking back up. We would instead see 1.8 trillion burned in the first year, and we'd see more tokens burned in the next subsequent 4 years at 2.4 trillion tokens.
Can we look at the first 2 years? Because in my opinion, I think we got 2 years of bull market ahead of us. Obviously, it could be longer, but I think roughly 2 years.
Yeah, this also isn't anticipating a bull market or anything pushing up price. And I'm still not doing, because if market buys start gobbling this up, it slows down what the buy and burn can remove, what it can essentially destroy. But it doesn't slow down the amount of money it's dumping in. So it will always keep dumping in. So after the third year, in an entire year, it could exert $145 million of buy pressure in its third year with the current model I'm looking at.
That is...
And money is going to come in one way or another. The question in this model, then, like, it's not looking at market buy pressure. Will it be able to destroy this many tokens? Will the price be at that? And that's, again, assuming that we keep up with a S model that I built that doesn't incorporate bull market cycles. So this doesn't actually look at what the bull market's going to want to do to it. This is more of a Wall Street style valuation at the base power of revenue and how much revenue could be applied to a liquidity pool month over month or year over year. So I have a bunch of different variables to basically resize the revenue. And those two variables are based on how bullish are we in terms of Uniswap and how much adoption do you think we could see year over year? Because realistically, if the internet adopted at 76% year over year, and I mean, Bitcoin alone is adopting, crypto essentially adopting at over 114% year over year, which is 214 if I were to put it into this model. I only have this at 120, or aka 20% year over year. Let's see what 40% looks like year over year. Wouldn't that be a great number? Let's have a look at 40% year over year. So let's see if this is plausible. By the fifth year, we're at 4.5 million users. We break 10 million users in 11 years. We break a 250 million users by 20 years. With this kind of math and adoption. Some people in the audience probably go, man, yeah, that's plausible. Like, I don't know, but I threw in the possibilities so you can look at your idea here. And when you get that kind of pressure year over year with growth from the model, now you can see our third year is over $231 million instead of $145 million of revenue applied to the liquidity pool. That's quite a sizable impact. By the fifth year, are we applying by the fifth year, we start being able to dump over $1 billion of buy pressure, buy burn into it.
Just 1.2 roughly.
Yeah, just 1.2. And I mean, that's a guaranteed buyer in the system. You really need me to do day over day stuff and show you now, if we show people buying like they are, what that does to price. Yeah, price is going to go up because, hey, look, now the buy and burn by itself, fighting two massive sells, one that's we're saying happened and one that could happen, another massive panic sell-off for whatever reason. And at the end of 5 years, we're looking at 222 X's from the sacrifice price. From the end of the second year, with no one buying in the market, no one pushing the price up, no mania, just a 2.7x from the sacrifice price. But wait, if you act now, we'll double your order. There's more. Here's the 10 and 20-year forecast. The heart attack material. When some people start going, wait, what are the X's on that? What did your model just... What if 250 million people were using Pulse X in 20 years? What could a token be worth? A Pulse X token could be $718 per token. What? Number of X's are sitting at 7 million since launch. That's kicking Bitcoin's butt in 20 years. That's assuming it doesn't get replaced, end up obsolete, get hacked, all the what if game horrible things that can happen in the future. Because as it says in great big red letters, warning, this is not financial advice.
Right.
All right. This is only in theory. This is just to show you potentially in conditions, because I haven't plotted every variable.
Yeah.
So no market buy. But then I admitted, I was like, oh yeah, the whole time I actually lied to you guys, because, oh wait, coins purchased right here in the what if game, the original model I built, there's the market buy, and then there's the market sell. So the crystal ball just transfers it over. So if I just go ahead and say, take this black, and I make some font on it, let's say white, and then, oh yeah, I can include a buy amount. And oh, look at the price. It, like, long term didn't seem to affect that $10 million buy, didn't seem to affect price long term much, especially when we know in the future there's a mega sell coming on that head. But in the midterm, we see, ooh, a little extra hump earlier in the graph. So yeah, there is the capability, but like, it turns into a huge mess, and it doesn't do slippage, and it's not really supposed to. I don't want to be the price guy, guys.
Sure.
I just wanted to show why using real financial instruments that Wall Street uses to take tangible value, revenue, and distribute it to the holders to give it a actual reason for it to be valuable. This is one form of redistributing value by taking the tokens and deleting them so you can never sell them again, and just giving the revenue to investors by dumping it in the liquidity. And the other way is to skip the liquidity pool and just give it straight to the investors so they can decide where they want to put it, like time dividend does. And so that's essentially the insaneness of the math. Now, if everyone wants to get heart attack worthy and assume that Elon Musk is getting Pulse X, Tweety, and Allcoin Daily, that we're going to kick Uniswap's butt. We're going to go to 50% of their potential. And you know what? We're going to get to that 175% adoption like the internet did year over year. Here's your heart attacks. Here's your math I don't believe in. All right? This is your future speculation. So our 5-year alone says under these conditions that we could see a 26,000x from the sacrifice price. It would be 100,000x from today's price, probably.
What about year two?
Yeah, and then if we skim on over to the 10-year forecast, we're looking at, just in 10 years, $316 per token. That's right, a 3 million X or a 10 million X from today's price. And in the 20-year forecast, that's right, $23 bloody million per single effing token. This is if no one sold in all 20 years. But how could no one sell? Everyone would want to take freaking profits. Well, it would create the worst bubble in the world that would not be unkin to Luna, but it would be possible because of the Earn protocol. You can just mint stablecoins to take profits from your Pulse X. You don't actually theoretically have to sell it, peoples.
And something that's kind of interesting, another interesting variable could be too, you know, how does the behavior of participants change when single-side staking comes? You know,
well, that's where
a lot of value.
Yeah, putting psychology into this math model is one thing where I just was whimsical by putting an S-curve into the adoption. I didn't really look at the psychology or the elements. So in this point, I'm going to stop sharing screen because I'd like to get rid of this and see your face again. Hey, Brandon, now that I have shown you the madness that my brain will do for math, and I'm still aware of the variables I'm skipping in a lot of cases, at least some of them. So the psychology of it, oh man, like how do you put a number on psychology? How do you put a number on Beanie Babies? Like some people try to use Metcalfe's law with Bitcoin, but that doesn't make Bitcoin always that price. It fluctuates and may run into the Metcalfe's law price. Like, how do you calculate sentiment? And I mean, if you knew that, if I knew that, I wouldn't be wasting my time on Twitter or YouTube. I wouldn't be going to work slinging drywall on walls. I would be sipping margaritas next to Richard Hart on some tropical island, laughing about everything. Maybe still shit troll tweeting on Twitter, but I got into this such a weird path. Like, if I knew how to calculate really sentiment, hey, we'd all be rich. So the question really it does come down is to how will sentiment affect these things? How will, because I mean, market buyer pressure will come when you see shiny objects. People start chasing green candles. This thing has built-in green candles. So what kind of manias will it produce? Like some people see these numbers and be like, yay, we're going to this price, like because we got here somehow in 3 years. One of my 10-year projections, as like people went insane. Guess what, guys? I'm evaluating it, and that's overinflated. Like I'm doing to Tesla, is coming down. Like there's going to be points where no matter what, mania will inflate above this price, and there's going to be points where people are going to see inflated bubbles or prices, and they're going to dump. So we're still going to see crypto ups and downs, but this is where the buy and burn, I think, will correct it. Where where we saw, okay, good cryptos do between 75 to 85% down. We even saw some 90%, 95% downs and some 99s to a couple this season. So let's assume that Pulse X had been running through this bear market. I think that essentially you would see like, okay, we took a 50% to 75% reduction in the asset price. And you might see where, oh, look, everything's doing a 1,000 to 5,000x. And Pulse X went, I did 15,000. And it's not going to be those kinds of numbers. Like somebody's going to quote me now and I'm going to forever hate it. I did not mean those numbers, but I'm trying to give context. Same way I say a liquidity pool with 10,000 tokens on each side. This thing doesn't exist, okay? Just in my head and everyone else's, I put it in their head. But the idea is the difference will be, there'll be a significant difference. Like without the buy and burn, Pulse X should be way more in the toilet because it wouldn't have seen that $5.9 million of buy pressure. Like if I go back into the like create a liquidity pool, set the price, and then dump the tokens that have been burnt back into the pool, and you watch the price dump more, there's our real price. Like there's our price as far as the market has decided, because the market hasn't really even officially gained faith in the future productivity of the DEX, where the DEX doesn't even have to do all the volume. If we get a bunch of other DEXs that build on this DEX that are doing a bunch of volume, you still get arbitrage. You still have to go through these pools. Like you still see intrinsic volume. So no matter what, Pulse X, being the most liquid DEX, sits at the heart of the chain, being able to refuel all of the arbitrage bots that interact with all these smaller DEXs that the people are interacting with. So
yeah,
we still see the bigger the pie gets, like a smaller piece of a bigger pie is still a lot of times a bigger piece than you had in the first place, is essentially what it comes down to. So the question is, what kind of use case adoption year over year do we see to Pulse X? It will gradually, unless market dumpers have a huge loss of faith and they go for punishment mode, which does not seem to be the niche of the community. Like as much as hex price is dumped, if you actually look at the amount of hex that hit the market as opposed to the amount of hex that has stayed locked in hex stakes or just stayed in stationary wallets, like it's surprising like how much like the community just holds things. Like, and eventually, like in my model I show, like I can show you how quickly the dumpers in the first 5 years, the dumpers could try and hold the price down for 5 years, and then essentially there's no more dumpers Like you run at, like, and then Richard Hart has to try and hold the price down, which he's not going to do, and he just gets to sit there and laugh maniacally because, well, his Pulse X is going to go up in value, and you all could have rode that train with him, but you all dumped your tokens. So I mean, the price is just built to go up. There has to be some sort of catastrophic failure. Now, it would be nicer to see adoption. Like, what could gain adoption? Single-sided staking. Essentially, it doesn't get used much on PancakeSwap because not a lot of tokens like to come along, provide liquidity, and give you tokens to dump into. It's a free money giveaway. Times have to be really great for free money giveaways to try and gain customers. So a third party coming to want to give away and do that, we'll have to wait and see. And then the attack vectors around it, how secure is it? It's not necessarily the best idea, but to have it available, to have the functionality, to have a front end. So if I wanted, I could hop on and be a jerk and make a meme coin over on GoPulse's website and then distribute it over on the single-sided staking and call it Crybaby. I could do that, and not saying it would have any value, but if I wanted to put one Pulse token with a bunch of them into a liquidity pool, and there it goes.
Better than nothing, yeah.
Yeah, there. Like, I mean, why would anyone give away free money? This is me giving away one Pulse token, essentially, and something I just created for the price of gas and posted for the price of gas. To have the options would be nice, but I am not in a position where I'm building anything or want to give away free money, but maybe someone will be in the future. That's a hope and a long shot. But the same idea where single-sided stake is the idea that if you put your tokens there, you're not going to sell them and you can earn some revenue, the same way that you stake and earn your yield on Hex. But instead now, why do you even care about single-sided staking the moment that the Liquid Loans protocol got forked for Pulse X and Power City is giving you the ability to just mint stablecoins against your Pulse X so you never have to sell them. There's your yield. Hold your risk. Wait for price to go up, and then, since it can go down 99%, maybe I should only mint 1% of the value of my stuff as a loan. Or maybe only 5% and really ratchet those numbers down so I'm not in a lot of danger of being liquidated. And then there's, like, it uses the liquidity protocol. So as Ethereum plummeted in price and had an 85% drop in price, from its highs of $5,600, $5,400. I wasn't tracking it very closely, but it bottomed down. Like, it was a hard bottom, but it dropped hard. But there was a protocol called Liquid, not Liquid Loans, and that's what Liquid Loans is forking. Its stablecoin gained value and hardened in that market, and we're using that technology. So that really removes a lot of the risks there, and then. Unlike Ethereum, like, this token has a built-in buying, like you have a reinforcement to the price that you're taking loans against. Just don't be reckless. And if it's really going to do X's, like that model suggests it could, well, then just having it in a place, like, just because you took 1 million tokens, say they get to $1 each, and then you take a 1% loan for $10,000. Well, now I'm screwed if the price doubles. Well, no, you can go back to that same loan and adjust it and increase it because the value has increased. So you can continue to increase your loan against that asset. And you could use those loans to buy more if you want, but that is bubble creating crap, which I wouldn't incentivize. But you can use those loans to make plays, to do leverage. You can just hold them on the side as some kind of de-risking. Like, it is completely up to you how you want to take it out, because a lot of people have tax concerns, and I'm not a financial advisor here, and tax is different in each and every country. So consult your local tax consultant. Go to somebody and ask them some questions. But taking a loan is usually not a taxable event in a lot of places. It is in a few, depending on the nature of it. So go and look, do your research. But yeah, that itself can have its own, like, hey, I can go sell and take my profits and get nailed by the government, have no tokens left, have lost my moon position, or I can slowly take loans, live modestly off of my big moon bags, and not even necessarily have to pay taxes in some places. What an option. Why would I have to single stake and get somebody else's third-party thing that I have to dump really quickly and still pay taxes on because I'm doing exchange tokens? Okay, in some places, again, not a financial advisor, but The earn protocol that Power City is giving us, the ability to fork that liquid loans, that great protocol, is amazingly bullish, because a lot of people will have the option of de-risking into that stable coin and wanting to use it, which means there'll actually be a demand to produce that stable coin, which, if I'm a whale, I could make a loan of that stable coin against my supply, provided in liquidity with a loan against maybe my Pulse, and pair liquid loan stablecoin with Power City's stablecoin. So my Pulse and my Pulse X are locked up, but I have literally a zero impermanent loss capability pool that is being monitored by oracles to keep it at parity at dollar to dollar and provide liquidity in 2 stable coins. And then earn fees in those stable coins. And then eventually, if I earn 100% APR worth of fees in those stable coins, I can go repay my loans and unlock my Pulse and my Pulse X and still be earning yield on a liquidity pool. Hey, did I just drop a major bit of alpha for someone that maybe wanted to get into low risk liquidity? I don't know.
Man, it's almost like there's a bright future, you know? It's almost like that. Oh, dude, this is so interesting, because it's so funny to see the potential, hypothetical, theoretical effect of the buy and burn in kind of like an enclosed environment. You incorporate that with psychology, more and more people buying, the potential for single side staking, some of these third-party things opening the door for more utility for PulseX. Man, you start adding all these things together, sentiment increasing, all this stuff. You know, it starts to look very, very interesting. And so I got to ask you.
The future's so bright, I wear my sunglasses at night.
There you go. Is there a reasonable way you think about price predictions? Like, do you think price predictions are just so unreasonable I don't even bother? Or is there like a price prediction you feel like, okay, you know, somewhat, you know.
So here's my mentality. Here's my mentality. Crypto's so volatile. Like Wall Street, you can get 5% gains, but you can also lose everything. That's not a lot of risk to work ratio. In crypto, you can lose everything, but you can get 10,000x gains. So since you're already in the highest risk thing, and you're assuming that 99% of everything is coming to get you and steal all your money, and that this is a speculative bubble, and that it's always going to collapse, well, then you...
Uh-oh. Did we lose Top Gun?
Hello?
You're back. I can hear your voice. Yeah, okay, you're good. Okay. Yeah, you're good.
So anyways, we can assume with these plays, so like people come in and they have to chase the biggest gains. They have to go after these 100x, 10,000x. That's all they care about, because they're such high risk, because they can lose everything, and because it bubbles up and then it crashes down. Now, it may bubble up again in 4 years, but these bubbles, they come, they go, they come, they go. You get in, you get out. The holder mentality has to be a whole different mindset, that crypto is going to be around for a long time. But imagine you could combine the idea of steady go up. Like, this is where I don't care if this balloons, because the mechanics of these things guarantee that if I bought at what I think is an undervaluation, that no matter what, the valuation should basically kind of guarantee a minimum value of these things. And that is where I'm pricing along, that if it goes way above that, yeah, awesome. A lot of other people are always chasing those moons, which is why I show the capability on the model to do it. I have to prepare my little heart in case it does things like this. And that's where, yeah, knowing the valuation of it, you might be able to see, like, this thing has inflated to 1,000 times its valuation. Maybe I should take some profits right here, because maybe it's going to come closer to its valuation where I can buy back in. We love the buy and hold mentality. Like, you're going to get into crypto. I've got into it. I love it. It's a lifestyle. Like, I buy it. Like, I haven't sold any of it. I've traded some for some other, but I have not sold any crypto out for fiat. Fiat has only gone goodbye, and crypto has gained and gone up and gone up. I accumulate. And I'm scaling my business in construction rather than to earn more money for crypto, rather than trying to earn money from crypto for my business. Like, it's the mentality of going in. So everyone's got a different reason for being here. Some people want quick gains. I see the long-term value of this. And yeah, this is a market where now builders are using the Wall Street tricks of giving reason for value for long-term for these things, that with the valuation capability, like, yeah, I have a better idea if the sentiment is way out of whack for what the mechanics of this thing are doing. And I'm not just chasing sentiment bubbles. I am actually looking at, well, maybe sentiment going like, oh, we're excited to trade, so there's going to be a bull market, so there'll be lots of volume. So I'm betting on the business capturing that volume rather than bidding on something in that market doing the particular move.
Right. Yeah.
Like, and it's an easier mindset to get around because I don't have to feel like I'm chasing. I don't feel like a degenerate in a gamble or in a casino. My gains may also not be 10,000 X's, but instead of having my 5% chance at a 10,000 X and a 95% chance at wrecked, I feel like I have a 10% chance at wrecked. I have an 80% chance at like 10X gains, and I got a 10% chance of my 10X. Or like, you know, like,
no,
because
that's a great way of thinking about it.
Yeah, like there's still other reasons for this thing to have value than some mania or some bubble or the Fed printing money at whimsy.
That's such a great point. Yeah. And so I gotta ask, do you have a preference between, you know, Pulse Chain, Pulse X, Hex? Like it seems like, given this discussion, we all see the, you know, the opportunity with Pulse X. But do you have a favorite? How do you think about the trifecta?
Okay, so the innovation I saw to Hex is, okay, you're giving the same trustless yield as Bitcoin. You're running on a more secure network of Ethereum. You're changing the mining concept so it's more energy efficient by piggybacking off their network. And instead of paying miners, you're just paying people to promise not to sell. That's kind of a really cool concept. Like, it was really a polite inflation rate of 3%, like as opposed to a lot of other DeFis are absolutely insane. Now, the initial supply of it I thought was a little extraneous, but I got bought into look into Hex, and Hex is basically a staple. It's Richard's beginning project. It built the community. It is essentially going to be what Pulse chainers consider gold. So I assume on Pulse chain that Hex will get treated a bit like Bitcoin and basically be our digital gold of the environment. And then we'll see Pulse, like I used to call it Ethereum, the digital silver, and like we'll see the commodity side of it. And like I expect them to all have their own independent cycles. There's going to be, I think, some points where they trade together during mega cycles, and then they're going to have some cycles where they uncorrelate. And this is where, okay, we had one Pulse to 100 Hex or something, or the other way around, 1 to 100 ratio pre-bridge. And we saw it kind of spike in all kinds of different directions. And we had a lot of people get very excited as it kept going up to 150, 180, 190, as Hex was getting more valuable. So it would get you more Pulse. Yeah, 1 Hex to 190 Pulse to 200. And everybody's acting, again, like this is the only direction it can go. And it started peeling back a little bit. But this is where altcoins have a season, then layer ones have a season, right? Like there'll be a point where these ratios can swing just as easily in the opposite direction. Like Hex will be great for having lower liquidity. Pulse will have a larger liquidity pool, just like Pulse X, which makes it more like a tank. So it goes up kind of a little more steady, a little harder to move around. But Hex, having lesser liquidity, means it can be more volatile, down and up, more money to be made, more likely to see the extreme X's. So where we might see like a 10x, 100x in Pulse, we could see a 10x amplifier to that to Hex, where the mania could drag Hex up. So if we see 10 to 100 in Pulse, we see 100 to 1,000 in Hex, or even 100 to 10,000 in Hex. Like we see a larger pump in Hex, but then again, like we saw this cycle, Hex took a harder correction than Ethereum. So this is where it's forever bound to Pulse and Pulse X. So as they do well, we'll be fine. And it does have a lot of long-term value. But I believe, like, now that I've really started to look at things and understand that, yeah, we were at the top of a bubble and I didn't know it when I bought in. I believe in all the mechanics. I believe in all the utility. But really, I believed in it at its current price at about 1 cent, you know, and that this was the likely path. Like that basically, like, it's hard, again, because it's not a real revenue model. It's more of a sentiment base that we already have things that allow you to send trustless yield. And so it got tied to Pulse Chain's narrative, though. So as Pulse Chain got delayed, I believe that's essentially why Hex got hit harder than it should have been, than a regular 90% correction. Because, everyone was expecting Pulse to launch, then it got delayed, then expecting it to launch, then got delayed. And that anger, that rage got taken out on the Hex price, essentially.
Yeah.
But that causes a lot of emo trading, and essentially the whole value of Hex contingent on the fact that this builder is going to keep building and keep building good things. So real value coming to Pulse X would be seeing the limit orders suddenly become available. Real value would seeing V2 actually see farming potential, so it can be a competitor to bring even more liquidity. Now, this is where, wouldn't it be interesting if he just leaves the buy and burn up for now, which would let other people build, bring dexes, make the market bigger. We do get the limit orders, but then we don't see farms and liquidity providing come until the bear market after the bull run in those farms to try and stabilize the liquidity pools when everybody wants to run as the market's crashing. Because how do you get people to keep a market live when the market is crashing? So ideally, you want small liquidity going into a bull run so price can pump more. Richard just said the same thing himself. The smaller the liquidity pool, the easier it is to pump price. So if he started incentivizing V2 with farms right now, how much more liquidity would be there? How harder would it be to move price? So they're like, I have no idea when or where he's going to do things. And definitely some people may have been very angry expecting fees and incentive.
What a crazy thought.
But there are dexes providing that. If that is the anger point, there are dexes providing that. And if enough of those other market dexes are getting that attention, Richard Hart, I don't think, is blind that I don't think he would wait too much longer to start incentivizing V2 farms if people started pulling their liquidity to purposely put it on the other dexes because they're getting treated better. If the liquidity starts to leave, essentially the customers have to get treated better, and Richard Hart is not silly in that fact. And right now he doesn't have, right, the banks give you what, 0.05%, not even 5%, like they're charging for their interest rate, or 5 point whatever, but on your return on your bank account they give you such minimal, utter crap return, but still lots of people use banks. And I think that mentality is a little bit ingrained possibly in Richard right now with Pulse X, that, people are still going to use it. So until it has a meaningful purpose for him to add that value, I don't think we're going to see it. And a meaningful purpose would come in the bear market to stabilize price, or if people finally in protest, the same way we saw truckers finally protest in Canada, if people start moving their liquidity to other dexes because they want their fees and want to be treated better, that's the way the public can vote and really show their concern. Because he might not read emails, he might not check tweets. I love the guy and I love the way he built, but you can't deny market sentiment when he goes on his favorite app, Go Pulse, and looks at the locked liquidity and goes, how did 297 million become 100 million? What do you mean all those assets are still on chain? What the fucks? So like, I'm not saying Fux is going to do that to them. Like, they have so much less liquidity, so much smaller market share, but competition is healthy. The same way Richard is competition for everyone else and brought an improved product by including a buy and burn. Awesome. Well, now other people are bringing improvements by giving better incentivization and voting systems and DAOs that are actually working, showing a working model there. And I mean, if you're not first, you got to be better. So at this point, he can't really set expectations. He danced himself into a corner with sacrifices and security laws and Gary Gensler being a ghoul. So being as quiet as he is one of the smartest moves you might be able to make, possibly. So for all we know, you can sit here and whine and complain, which absolutely does nothing to help. And the whole time, he can't say a word that Yeah, those little bastards wait until they see limit orders and V3 sides, and the V3 pools have incentivization. And he could be sitting there mumbling, "I'm going to be humble, and they're all going to eat it. They're going to feel so bad." Like, I'm not saying he's being like grudging like that, but he could be working away in the background to make our lives better, while we're all being crap heads and being rude and saying what a horrible job he is. We know software is hard, and every time he's given us an expectation or a deadline, we've made memes about 2 more weeks until the internet's tubes clogged. So, to him to actually tell us what he's currently working on or set any expectations is just been proven, whether it's Gary Gensler or his own fans, it's a bad idea. So I think we're going to start seeing surprise release stuff. And that's essentially where he might let out a single tweet that something has changed, like he has with the farms that showed up and went. And basically, he's also said this is the world's greatest experiment. So he in himself is playing around to figure out what works. So the market may make votes and moves, and he may make changes. And we may be all blown away when he's already got V4 from Uni worked in with V3's functionality, and we see those contracts, and somehow he incorporated Tornado Cash's privacy, and we have the most amazing decks in the world, and everyone else goes and cries, and Buck buries his head in a pillow boo-hooing because he can't get the Tornado Cash privacy to work with all his instruments, and he already launched. Meanwhile, at the same rate, Buck could end up with the most popular decks, and Richard could just go sip Mai Tais on a beach and not give a crap and play Satoshi. You never know here, which is where it is decentralized, and it's exciting, and it is speculative, but we have possibilities, and either one didn't bet on the chain failing. It's just, which decks do you think might do better? Okay. Like, I'm heavily invested in Pulse X for what it is at the heart of the chain, being an RH, and he's got 300,000 followers, a much larger market. A lot of volume is traveling through there. Even on its worst days, it's seeing $15 million of volume, which is like still. So 1% of 15 million is 150,000, and if it's taking 1/3% in fees, or 0.3 of that, we're talking about still just a little under $50,000 daily of buy pressure at the worst volume from that buy and burn being hauled out from V1's pools. And yeah, V2 still contributing with the normal buy amount, which is a little bit less. But yeah, we're seeing still, like, this is just in its infancy, and everyone complaining just makes me laugh, because I'm like, all right, I sit here and all I see is the bullish possibilities, so much so that I booked an hour of my time to come sit on your channel, and it's been 2 hours and 15 minutes, and I'm not sure we're even close to a stop time, because you don't look like you're tapping out. However, can I take a minute or two? Do you want to address your viewers, maybe come up with a question?
Yes.
I just need to grab a glass of water. And
please go. I got it. Yeah. So guys, folks, this has been a amazing live stream so far. I think this is the perfect one to say, folks, please like, subscribe, share, do all that good stuff. And I kind of maybe want to summarize and kind of distill some of the important takeaways that we've seen so far. So we took a very decent chunk of this live stream has been delving into Top Gun's model, where he created a model where essentially, if we kind of input the current various variables, volume, total liquid supply, and assume what kind of growth we're going to see, whether it's linear, parabolic, S-curve, and input a couple features, and extrapolate that over the next month, 2, 6, 8, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. What we're seeing essentially with just buy and burn, this isn't assuming buy pressure, this isn't assuming single side staking, this isn't assuming psychology, this isn't assuming Power City coming in and bringing new feature set for Pulse X. We're seeing how very, very, very significant non-trivial amounts of the supply is being bought and burnt in the not too distant future, and that's very, very likely to have an impact here on, you know, the potential return on investment. Like, this is, I think, the first, and Top Gun, let me know if you agree with what I'm saying here. I think this is the first time a buy and burn feature has been played out to this large of an extent. Like, I'm not aware of any other kind of DeFi thing that has this similar kind of buy and burn feature that's able to address this larger market, that's going to have this much volume. It's going to be super, super interesting to see how plays out over the future. And I wanted to ask you, because I kind of did this math myself, and I'm curious if it makes at least intuitive sense to you. But based on what we've seen so far with Pulse Chain and PulseX, I don't think it's unreasonable to assume that in roughly 2 or so years, maybe it takes a little bit longer, but roughly 2 years, we're looking at double-digit buy and burn for PulseX and burn for Pulse Chain.
By double digit,
like 10%, like around there, roughly 2 years from now, about 10%, because it's been 3 months, right? And so far we've seen in that 3
okay.
months.
Oh, yeah. So,
Yeah.
no, within a year, I'm like at the current rate, like I would love if we have a good 6-month Ethereum run, like we are, and even if we spike up with a few X's to price, and mooned maybe back up to sacrifice with PulseX, the volume would probably spike in the DEX quite a bit. I think at this point, with the first 2 months, I'm starting to see enough reasonable data that we could see 1 trillion of the supply gone within the first year. Right now, we're seeing a pretty low lull. Like, I mean, a lot of the burn happened in that first month. We had a very exciting month. We're 2.5 months in now. I mean, as price came down, like the burn got more effective. Like, it is funny, but a lot of those math models I went and just did were looking, and basically all of them have said essentially that somewhere over 1 trillion tokens is likely to be burned in the first year. Whether we get past 1 or 2 trillion, that was basically where my math model was like, things could start ramping up by the end of the year, and it can start slowing down pretty rapidly. So at this point, 2.1 trillion is the 10% outside of the OA supply. So I am very confident we will crack 5% this year. But that is the question. Will we get past 10%? How long can the market stay irrational and dump this coin down and ignore my math videos? Even though I'm happy with it at this price, because I'm poor. I scaled my own small business with 1 employee, and then I take a small amount of profit and I DCA in. And thank you, Allah Jesus Buddha, everybody, all the crypto gods, Richard Hart. You're telling me it's even cheaper than when I sacked? I ain't bought hurt. I bought more. And the longer it stays at this price, I will just buy with the buy and burn. I'm content with it. Nobody in the market needs to see my videos or buy the price or close this gap on me, because I can see in my math that no matter what, I will see returns on my money from this point. Now, the only question is how long I have to wait, and how often in crypto can you look at something and go, that's almost a sure bet. I'm not guaranteed 10,000x, but I am guaranteed that, hey, like over the course of years, I should see like a 10x, 20x on my money, which is better than Wall Street. And I feel more sure about the code, and it's just about it working for 5 years and not getting hacked, or Richard Hart somehow having a drunken cheeseburger crying moment like David Hasselhoff or something. Like, hopefully he doesn't have a mid-crisis meltdown or nothing. I think he looks pretty good. He doesn't drink. He just has to get working out, I think. Or stop calling himself fat too. Like, you know, he picks on himself occasionally. Like, there's a difference between humble and just being mean to yourself, man.
Yeah. I hope one of these girls don't break his heart, man, because that's the one thing I'm worried about, because he's running around with all these girls. If he gets his heart broken, just wait for the bear, Richard, and then get into a relationship. But man, okay, you know what? Too, I wanted to bring this up because I actually saw Buck tweeted about this yesterday, and I think I agree. Which is, I think, and I'm curious what you think about this. I think the macro, not micro, macro lows are in for PulseX, and let me tell you why I think, and I want to get your thoughts on this. So it is my perspective, my point of view, my opinion that when Richard was tweeting about removing single side staking for PulseX, and that one famous tweet that sparked like a big brouhaha on Twitter, I interpret that as him essentially spreading fear, uncertainty, and doubt over the design intention of his own decks. That's how I interpret that. And even though that's like bad framing in a sense, I don't see what more bearish thing can happen than the very own founder of his decks funding his own decks. And so when I saw that happen, I was saying to myself, okay, number one, this isn't good. Number one, two, I'm not happy. But number three, what worse thing can happen than the very own founder funding this? So I actually ended up buying it. And even though I was going off on Twitter, I was also at the same time live tweeting, hey, I'm buying this. And I actually ended up buying the lows. So given that and some other stuff, like we've had months below average J1 stack rate, like there's been time for people to sell. And so what I'm getting at here is like, I think there's some reason to think that the macro lows are in. What do you think? There's a lot there, but
I think that I watch entirely too much charts, but everything about the chart is screaming that the bottom's in. I have my own question that I brought up at the beginning of the show about how the credit event coming to the financial markets is going to ricochet through crypto. Could there be a panic bottom? Like if you look at the Ethereum drop where it V'd down like during the market crash of like 19 or 20. I'm wondering if there could be like a panic moment like that, but not a real like bottom.
Sustained,
the chart is screaming that the bottom is in. I mean, realistically, everybody but the whales got out. The price dipped down to whale sacrifice numbers and just below that. Everybody has gotten out that I think is going to get out. And yeah, I mean, there are points where if I want to dump down the paranoid cycle, because like there was a certain point where I like trying to anticipate Richard was a little difficult, but it actually got easier if I'm just played the game like, well, what would I do? And sometimes I'm a little extra maniacal. But like I sat there and I've been making these math models the whole time. And like I'm omni-aware that like, okay, Richard might not follow me, but he is aware of my math model. I know of someone who personally pretty much like blackmailed him into consuming the video. So like he's aware that I'm a big proponent of PulseX. I love the math of it. And then basically I've been building all these projections, basically making economic forecasts for him. And then even remodeling the thing based on tweets. So he could like see how this might work, like changes like over the like since sacrifice of it, without having to follow me. Like he could follow me from an alt account, or the one guy could just be making him watch video after video whenever I do one about it. But I would try to keep up on the game theory of it and project with my math what was going on. That's why I have some like extra fields in it. So I have this paranoia where sometimes I'm like, there, I got my crystal ball set on seeing the future. And then Richard Hart saw my episode, came along and smashed my crystal ball and changed PulseX. Like, liquidity changes, this changes. And I laugh about it. Like, well, in testnet, we got a very functional PulseX. There was even limit orders, I believe, in one version, which I didn't go play with, but I heard of. And like, okay, we're getting awesome functionality. And it really does feel that PulseX was underdelivered. And it does feel like Richard Hart has resentment against lettuce hands and may have wanted to see some of them removed.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
We understand he's a very, very bright man. Like I respect him a lot, as much as I might make fun of him once in a while. I do greatly respect him. Very smart, and he could be playing games where he launched. It's okay for the price to be down. And not care if everyone bottomed out. So metric wise, like a lot of factors add up to me that the dip everyone was expecting in Pulse was amplified in PulseX from the people who did really just get in on the PulseX sack to get some Pulse chain. So with that fact, basically we saw an exaggerated dip in PulseX and a limited dip in Pulse. So essentially that bottom in Pulse back in the middle of June, I was like, yeah, that's the bottom. Doing my thing on the 15-minute chart that most people are impossible, and I called it out on Twitter, and everyone was making fun of me. Come back when you got a daily, da 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 da. And everyone else that, you know, follows me that probably went, I'm going to DCA with him because this is never guaranteed, but usually, like, yeah. So I've been watching it, but PulseX, I haven't been making those same calls because it's been more volatile, and it has like retested that bottom. Like it actually in July, I think, got a little deeper. So like I'm pretty sure though, like we're sitting at the point where Pulse is heading into a point where it's probably like, if it's going to do what Ethereum did, it's going to have a 2-3x and then go sideways some more, which will basically drag PulseX the same way, and Ink and everything else on the chain. So I mean, history does not repeat itself, but it often rhymes. Like everybody was waiting for that Ethereum bottom, and I'm like, nah, Hex bottom, 33 days. Like, yes, it's going to go sideways the same way, but it says sideways slightly down. It went sideways slightly up. Ha, ha, ha. And yeah, you know, like history rhymes. It's still the same, but it's different. And in the different, Ethereum launched relatively bare. And Pulse launched with a lot of supporting stuff on it and a lot of stuff already ready to come. So the excitement is better, and that's where, yeah, we're moving sideways, but sideways and up as opposed to sideways and down. Like, it's a subtle difference, but it's one that's really reassuring and generates hope for the future. And so the documentary I think you asked about, and I did speculate, I think, in Spaces last night about the effect of the documentary. Either that or I'm just remembering Spaces last night. But usually you have a sell the, like, buy the rumor, sell the news event in a lot of things. But essentially in that, you've got something like, oh, well, the company's about to expand or they're going to buy up something. And so this means a whole bunch of changes, possibly future revenue, but not for like 6 months or a year and a half, as a company's got to work it all out on Wall Street. So this anticipation of an event, which will have future value, but has to be related over time, over the network effect. The few people that are studying this and analyzing this that put out the value of it way ahead of its value build the rumor. So then when the event happens, like, all right, everything's going to come, it's like, yep, that was the height of the bubble that these analysts created, getting too excited too early about it. Whereas this is not about company expansion or new features that someone is getting excited about. This is completely awesome. One of the best shenanigans ever, getting people to pay to have crypto advertising jammed down their throat. And in a market with wonderful timing where writers are on strike because Hollywood's sucking and the box offices are thirsty for revenue, independent film crews and the IFC whole circuit really grew in 2009 to like 2010 after the writer's strike, when they needed alternative film. So considering what documentaries have done recently with The Sound of Freedom, I think that we could see a really strong marketing effect from the box office wanting people to see a movie, people wanting to see a movie, and suddenly a huge awareness uptick, and an advertising gatekeeping where it's, whether we see a bubble in the next week that pops early, like over some unsatisfactory first weekend box office returns, over the next couple of months, like that's the kind of event which says, yeah, Ethereum took 6 months to start mooning. Wouldn't it be funny if we got there 6 weeks after the documentary release and just 4 months after our chain launched? Like, instead of going sideways and down, we've gone sideways and up. And then we can have another major little jump pump about this thing. And then all of a sudden we start mooning even sooner because everyone's drooling, knowing what layer ones do. And no one knew what a layer one would do when everyone was investing in ETH. So there's a lot more front running and anticipation. So I'm interested to see how the chart goes. I really am.
Yeah.
But nobody can see the future, man. Like that's just possibilities. And then meanwhile, aliens or a staged alien invasion could happen because they want to put more lockdowns and suddenly print more stimulus. So, everything could go sideways in a whole different direction, and crypto could be banned. And then we have to get illegal implants in order to access the network. But we can still get crypto, man. It'll always be there. Yeah. But everything could change. Man, nobody knows the future, but things are looking bright right now. I do like the look of the chart. It does look like a bottom. I'm glad I've gotten some DCAs in. I'm upset I haven't gotten more in, but it is what it is.
Well, what about non-RH things? I know you're involved in time.
Yep.
Could you just tell us, to what extent do you dabble in non-RH things? Is it just time? Are you Cardano? Are you a secret XRP guy? To what extent do you live in that non-RH world?
Okay. So with the time ecosystem, I'm a full participant with their ecosystem. So that means holding IM time and future. Then I, because of them, have to hold a little bit of BNB and a little bit of Ethereum because they're a multi-chain system. They started on BNB. I was lured over there. I own a little bit of Bitcoin. Just we're talking a few thousand Satoshis.
Sacrilege.
Worth. And then essentially I own a crap ton of Hex from my perspective, from spending a lot of money on it, but not necessarily having a lot of tokens, and realizing, the people who were first to get in better. So as the projects came, I made sure to sack for liquid loans, for Power City, for fiat, then I think I got a couple bucks into Tetra, just because Hexy Bastard has been in the community so long. I threw $5 at 9-inch. But real serious holder, Mintra, How to Pulse, I am Power City, liquid loans, fiat. Those are my core providers, where I got the majority of my finances in that weren't heavily weighted in RH products.
One thing, sorry, IM or time or both? Because there's internet money token and then there's time. So
time didn't launch. I was there.
You were there before.
I was there long before the sacrifices. I was in on all the sacrifices. So I was accumulating IM shortly after launch.
Okay, that's good, because I've been accumulating some IM recently. Because I think I wrongly dismissed it, just because I like time, the utility of time, quite a bit. But if time does well, then I think IM might do well as well. And the valuation on IM is nothing. First of all, nobody knows about it. Nobody cares about it. There's fuck all for volume, fuck all for liquidity. But it's correlated to time, and time's somewhat correlated to pulse chain. So, there's a knock-on effect.
And they have a buy and burn using the swap fees made from the wallet to buy IM and dump it. And what does a buy and burn do? I just showed a math model. Do you want me to turn it over to IM?
Yeah, please, yeah.
No, I'm not sure I want to dive into the math model again. This has been awesome. We could do another episode because I got to do tweaking to the model. I got to find some time.
Sure.
But honestly, we're getting almost at 2.5 hours. I think I got to go.
Yeah. Like you mentioned, you
off here, but it's been wonderful talking. But essentially, IM is subject to a buy and burn as well. But PulseX has a huge customer base already. IM is slowly growing there, so the buy and burn won't have as much volume, not as much power. But that's where I still look at these and believe in these instruments. And all of these protocols that I like, you can earn some of the fees that they generate. Essentially, I don't have to leverage trade. I can stake my tokens, add some liquidity to a leverage trading protocol, and make money every time some dum-dum goes and gets wrecked because they decided to leverage trade on something. I get to participate in the business and be the market, be the house, be the casino. That's basically my mentality, is rather than speculate on individual things, I own a little bit of everything. I kind of BlackRocked it, shotgun approached a little bit to every project, and I got in on the sacrifices. So I'm waiting for a lot of tokens to release still.
Yeah, same.
And yeah, I've been heavily invested in Pulse Chain since February, since all these sacrifices were running of 2020. Like, I'm OG in that sense. And that's another reason where, like, every person that, if you go back to my YouTube and see the live streams, Mooch Movies, I did not give any money to, and Chia did not give any money to, but I also said I did not have the money to give to those projects at the end of those videos. And the other ones that I had on, and I'm like, yeah, I'm excited, definitely. Basically, I had Just Ask Jesse on, I think, from when he was participating with Liquid Loans instead of Power City. I had the Long Vacation from Power City on my show. I had Dylan HEXADIAN on my show from Fiat. Like, I interviewed all of them and was super excited about the technology and have been for a long time. So yeah, I've been here lurking in the background and love it. And I think that all of them are leading the way in actually sharing the revenue from valuable protocols with their investors and making a whole nother class of crypto and blue chip stocks that we can basically cater to Wall Street. Because occasionally, if you watch me on Twitter and actually look through my follows, you'll see that I follow a bunch of FinTwit guys, and that a couple of them follow me.
Yeah.
And you like hear the understanding I have the financial market. Like, I try to really look at the value and something they can sink their teeth into.
Speak their language. Yeah.
Yeah, because there's money there, and wouldn't it be nice, like, we're rebuilding their stuff, like something they can understand, something they can play in. Yeah, I think it's really beneficial to have these options and these games.
Ooh, man, I'm excited. Dude, I think this was a great conversation. Super interesting stuff. Like you mentioned, we're up against 2.5 hours here. Do you want to plug your stuff and maybe get some final words, tell people where to find you, kind of thing?
Top Gun HEXADIAN at UTwit scam. YouTube, Twitter, and Telegram. I always call it telescam or scam, because a lot of scammers go around on Telegram. Like, I got nicknames for everything, but basically Top Gun HEXADIAN, it's the same even at Discord. Even at TikTok, I made one video where I'm like, blame Bitcoin. So yeah, I don't know if I'm that much of an influencer. I'm mostly heavy on Twitter. I haven't had time to make a video on YouTube, so I was glad you got me out of my corner and asked me some questions, because I'm like, what do people even need to hear? At a certain point, I overstudied and got oversaturated in information, and as you can see, like, I could keep going, but I have prior engagements. So
yeah.
Basically, you guys are welcome to follow me on Twitter. I hold spaces. I try to give light to any projects I think are new and good. Anytime tech support needs to happen, I'm there. And if I have to comment on game theories and what I think might be bad practices or good practices, I throw in my 2 cents. I just generally try to help the community. So yeah, as long as I have the time, I do what I can. I don't charge money for any of my services. However, since Pulse Chain launched, some people have tipped me. That's been really, really cool. It's been an awesome experience. And obviously, if you tip me, then it's like, oh, I only had 15 minutes for you. Now I got to make 45. Okay. So, like, you know, I'm not charging. I will make time for you if I can. But yeah, obviously, money makes the world go round a little bit. And I love accumulating crypto. So if you're going to throw crypto at me to pick my brain personally, I definitely make time for people. So I do, unfortunately, have to go, man. So thanks for having me on. It's been a pleasure.
Super generous. Oh, man, you've been very generous with your time. Great live stream. Everyone, thank you all so much for tuning in. We'll wrap it up here. Until next time, everyone. Take care.